Chapter 51. Harvest Day. The closer Qinxia got to the cave, the faster his pace became. He thought that he had been missing for almost the entire afternoon and night, and Angron and Ono would definitely be worried. They probably felt that they were taken away by their slave owners as punishment, or that they were slaughtered for being disrespectful during meals, and they must have been very anxious. Thinking of this, Qinxia's steps became much lighter, and the confusion and solemnity brought to him by the crazy patriarch of the Tark family also dissipated a lot. Qinxia likes the feeling of being cared for by others. When a security intelligent machine sent a signal to the gate and it opened, the gladiators all stood up when they saw Qinxia was safe and sound, and surrounded him amid the roar of the gate falling again. The person in charge of the arena didn't do anything to you, did he? Where have you been? Such concerned questions filled Qinxia's ears. Qinxia thought that he might be asked about his condition, but he didn't expect that almost everyone would come around to ask about his condition, even those who had never spoken a word to him and had only made eye contact once or twice. But Qinxia was not particularly surprised. The environment of the Colosseum is closed and dangerous. It is an instinct in human genes to stick together for warmth. What's more, even the Skinner, the Nasa twins and the 10 gladiators who later refused to follow the principle of not killing had fought against the untouchable slaughterers together with everyone else. It's not surprising that their friendship progressed so quickly. The head of the Tark family is a madman. Qinxia sighed, then opened his arms, but as you can see, I am safe and sound, it's just that I did something. Angron breathed a sigh of relief when he heard that Qinxia was fine. Those who had little interaction with Qinxia turned around and left quietly to the corner, doing what they had to do. Follow me. Qinxia spoke softly, and his words were transmitted into the ears of the person he wanted to hear. There are only 4 people, Ono, Angron, Crest, and Yukila. Including Qinxia, a total of 5 people came to the corner of the cave where Qinxia often sat cross-legged in meditation. Then, as Qinxia waved his arms, an invisible barrier separated the internal area of the cave. From the subjective perspective of people outside the barrier, Qinxia sat in the corner to rest after coming back. But for the people inside the barrier, everything was normal. They could see what Qinxia was doing and saying. Ever since Qinxia made up his mind to take the risk and explore his own psychic talent, and after a series of events, especially the battle just now, he has become more and more adept at using psychic power. He does not need to devote special energy and time to study a way to use psychic power for some small things. Yukila, the prosthetic they gave you. Qinxia pulled the young gladiator's iron hand, is this useful? They didn't just use a piece of junk to make do, did they? Yukila's broken arm was replaced by a new metal prosthesis. This prosthesis looks no different from an ordinary person's arm. If Qinxia didn't touch it, he wouldn't even be able to tell that it was made of metal. It's exactly the same as the hand I was born with, and it doesn't hurt anymore after I put it on. Yukila said as he made clenched and unclenched fists to show Qinxia how suitable this prosthetic arm was. Yukila is still immersed in the joy of having his limbs intact again. Crest and the others watched Qinxia take care of Yukila's arm, recalling that not long after Qinxia left, a doctor came in to install a prosthesis for Yukila, allowing Yukila to enjoy treatment that other gladiators would never be able to enjoy. Crest and Ono exchanged glances, and the former realized that Qinxia might have made some deal with the patriarch of the Tark family. Angron felt Yukila's joy, all the joy since Yukila recovered, and did not notice what Ono and Crest discovered at this time. Crest asked first, speaking of you. I made a deal with the patriarch of the Turk family. Qinxia let go of Yukila's hand, then looked at Ono, then at Crest and Angron in Yukila's astonished eyes. Qinxia had already thought about how he would answer if he was questioned about what he had done. It's not about deception, it's not about making excuses to hide or refusing to explain, but about being honest. A deal was made with the patriarch of the Talco family, and it was a deal, and there was no hiding it. This was not a decision made for the current interpersonal relationships and special circumstances, but because of Qinxia's habits. When leading a scientific research team, Qinxia would use the simplest and most straightforward way to communicate with each other the information they had obtained or mastered. Unless there was a special reason for something, he would not beat around the bush or deliberately conceal it. Behaviors such as concealment and ambiguity that are done subconsciously for emotional reasons will be intercepted by rational thinking about whether they are necessary and effective. Yukila's arm was replaced. There are 2 other conditions. From now on, we will have a steady supply of medical supplies. We will no longer have to rely on the whim of the arena director to get bandages. And, we no longer need to fast. Qin Xia stated these 3 conditions frankly. Crest and Honor were somewhat at a loss as to what to do with Qin Xia's frankness. Yakula was wondering whether it was because of his own affairs that Qin Xia did something he didn't want to do. That High Knight? He's our enemy. Angron couldn't understand. We benefited from the deal, and he obviously benefited too. How can you help our enemy? It's a long story. Qin Xia sat down cross-legged, took off the invisibility cloak and spread it on the ground, then took off the weapons and backpack that were previously covered by the invisibility cloak and placed them on the ground. Qin Xia then narrated what happened when he was having dinner with the crazy patriarch of the Tark family, and how he went to a manor, killed someone first, and then accomplished the 3 things he wanted to do. No matter how big or small the matter is, it is stated in a straightforward manner. I want to make weapons, I want to make something that can hack into the security machine, and I also want to try the possibility of beheading the slave owner after escaping the arena. Qin Xia opened his backpack. Even if that madman doesn't agree to my 3 conditions, I will agree to go to the manor to kill people, because this is my only chance to leave the arena and take the opportunity to do what I want to do. All in all, it was a very fruitful trip. Qin Xia shook out all the contents of his backpack. Angron had never seen the things in the backpack. Crest and Yakula had been slaves since childhood. Qin Xia didn't expect them to be able to tell what these things were, so he planned to explain them one by one in person. But Ono saw it. Gladiator machine gun, Gladiator beam cannon, Gladiator energy pistol, Gladiator high-frequency wave sword, these are all Gladiator series weapons. The explosive in your backpack is a scatter grenade. When it lands, it will release a beam to sweep all nearby enemies. If this thing is thrown into a bunker, it will kill everyone inside. And this data pad. X-ray eyepiece, did you kill the elite noble guards? Ono fiddled with the heavy machine gun, checking it very neatly to see if there was any damage, and opened the gun to check if there was any residual ammunition inside, because he knew that this type of machine gun was very prone to accidental discharge. After putting down the heavy machine gun, Ono picked up the beam cannon and pressed the trigger 3 times to put the gun into the energy storage stage, then pressed the trigger 4 times to put the gun into the deactivated state. After fiddling with the 2 big guys, Ono sighed, "Today is your harvest day." Chapter 52. The Untamable Bear. We are all squatting in the arena, how do you know so much? Angron was very puzzled and curious, if I grow up to your age, will I automatically acquire the knowledge you know? Crest couldn't understand these weapons either, but she used a mocking look at Angron to hide her lack of knowledge. I recognize the sword in here. Yakula picked up the sword. I have seen this damn thing cut through the steel-hard flesh of desert worms with my own eyes. Ono stopped fiddling with the weapons, stood up, looked at Qin Xia and Angron, who were both puzzled, and explained, I have not only seen these weapons, but I have also used them. I was once a member of the rebel army, and we used these weapons to fight. Ono looked at Angron again. We ordinary people don't have your size. We can't tear steel apart with our bare hands. If we can't master these weapons that belong to slave owners, then the uprising I participated in would not have lasted 2 months, but only 1 minute. Angron nodded. Crest looked at Ono in surprise. She thought that this man who looked as scary as a bear was just a kind-hearted unlucky guy, but she never imagined that he was actually a ruthless character who had participated in the rebels. Qin Xia was also surprised by this. The information he knew did not include Ono's past, so he also did not know that Ono had ever participated in the rebel army. Insurgents, under normal circumstances, the term refers to a group of people engaging in armed resistance. But in the place of Nusaria and in the language of Nusaria, the word rebel and death have the same origin, which is enough to show that only a ruthless person would join the rebels. That is all in the past. The rebels, my companions, and my reputation as the untamable bear, have long been buried in the red sands of Nusaria. Ono obviously didn't want to talk much about the things that happened in his youth, even though the people present were all people he absolutely trusted and with whom he had a lifelong friendship. I mentioned the rebel army just to say that I can use these weapons. If you need me to use them one day or I want to teach others how to use them, just come to me. Ono said to Qin Xia. Qin Xia smiled and nodded. He now had a plan to deal with the thing he had been worrying about. Of these weapons, he would only use the heavy machine gun and the sword. If the sword required any special actions to activate, like tapping 3 or 4 times, he wouldn't use it. Even the way to use a heavy machine gun was something Qin Xia learned through visual observation from the soldiers using machine guns when he was in the manor, charging towards the four-legged machine in front of the corridor with the psychic barrier. It was a surprise that Ono could use these weapons. "Excuse me." Yukila suddenly raised his hand and asked Ono sincerely, "When I was a child, I heard that the rebels were forcibly implanted with prostheses by their leaders, and that the prostheses could produce and sell their own excrement, and that the rebels were mass-producing small rebels in the wilderness every day and night. This is fake, right?" Ono was stunned by Yukila's words. It took him a long time to react. He looked confused and said, "Where did you hear that? How can we have implants? Besides, we are either busy running around or too tired to move every day. How can we create a small army at night?" "I guessed right." Yukila clenched his fists excitedly. "I said the propaganda of the High Knights was false. But the slaves who worked with me at the time thought I was defending the so-called thugs who I had never seen with my own eyes." Ono frowned, his expression changed from bewilderment to astonishment, then to disbelief, and then to melancholy. Qin Xia, who was observing Ono from the side, had never seen a person with so many expressions on his face in less than 2 seconds. If the profession of actor appears in Nukria in the future, Ono's reaction at this time can be regarded as a textbook example. Although this is a real emotional expression that can never be performed, it is an expression of one person's emotions. So, when our rebel army was fighting the slave owners, wild beasts, and poisonous insects in the Red Sand Desert, Ono's voice trembled. People in other places thought we were a bunch of lunatics who lived on shit and had no moral or ethical concepts. Faced with this question, Yukila's head shook up and down very slightly, but then shook left and right sharply. "No, of course not. Some people may think so, but not all of them." Ono questioned Yukila with his eyes, but his eyes gave Yukila the feeling of a heavy hammer rather than a sharp knife, as if they were going to smash open a door to the truth. "Well, most of them," Yukila muttered, "but I think those video images are fake." "Are there any video images?" Ono's dry and cracked lips trembled. Yukila opened his mouth to speak but stopped, his eyes dodging. He spread his hands and put them back to his waist, licked his lips and wanted to say something, but closed his mouth again. After hesitating for a long time, Yukila whispered, "When I first entered the arena, I was not afraid of your bear-like body at all, because I knew you. The guards played your video in the square, in which you forced the female soldiers to line up in front of their relatives. I believed it at the time, but later I told my mother about it." Yukila said quickly, "My mother said she saw you robbing the guards' supply transport team and distributing the goods to the poor, so I firmly believe that you are not a bad person." After hearing this, Ono's eyeballs trembled a few times in his eye sockets, and he retreated to the corner of the wall and slid from the wall to the cold ground. "You have never done such a thing." Angron sensed Ono's emotions. "I know as well as you do that you have never done anything evil." Ono swallowed his saliva as if seeing stars, and swallowed back the explanation he was about to say. It was indeed much easier to have Angron here than for him to explain it himself. "This is very important information," Qin Xia analyzed seriously. "When our rebels were fighting the slave owners, most people thought we were just eating shit." Ono took 2 breaths. "This is really an important piece of information. I mean, the information behind this is very important." Qin Xia glanced at everyone and said his own inference, "Obviously, they have a way to create so-called real evidence, and they must have a mature system to spread the false information they created to every corner. This means that if one day we choose to leave the arena when the time is right, we will be subjected to the same propaganda attack." The only one who responded to Qin Xia's speculation was Angron, who felt the same way and nodded. Ono huddled in a corner, murmuring in pain, "Why are we not welcomed wherever we go?" Yukila looked at Ono apologetically. Crest lowered his head in deep thought. No one knew what he was thinking about. "Let's talk about this first." Qin Xia raised his hand and made a hole in the rock. He put all the things he brought back into the hole and then closed the rock. The barriers were also removed. Kleist turned around, put his arm around Yukila's shoulders, and led him away, muttering to himself. "Can you tell me more? Tell me more and I'll teach you some powerful fighting techniques." "What? Ma'am? What?" "Of course it's the video about Ono you mentioned." Hearing what Kleist and Yukila whispered, Qin Xia sighed. He originally thought that the ruling skills of the Nusaria slave owners were close to zero, and that they could only maintain their rule by relying on black technology. But now it seems that slave owners are very good at taking advantage of people's curiosity and using technical means to launch propaganda attacks on their enemies. Qin Xia felt that when he was in the arena, He had to consider in advance the many things he would do after escaping from the arena, and he had to add one more thing dealing with propaganda attacks. Chapter 53, Exploring the Bag to Get Something. Another night. Qinxia was sitting cross-legged in meditation again, with his eyes closed, but his mind was very active. From Qinxia's subjective perspective, it was not that he had only darkness in front of him with his eyes closed, but everything was presented very clearly and intuitively before him. There is no distance, no barriers, no space. Just as Qinxia usually observed the world under his psychic vision, everything was presented to him in every detail. The microscopic world that can only be seen with expensive microscopes was presented in an extremely intuitive way before his eyes. In the psychic vision, Qinxia felt more like a camera, or a viewer, rather than a living person whose eyes were limited by the physiological visual system. I want to go out and have a look. When this thought emerged in Qinxia's mind, his perspective left the ground, and he easily penetrated the gate of the cave and came to the corridor outside the cave. After the view moved forward about 20 meters, Qinxia saw a thick fog. This is the limit of the distance he can travel using his psychic vision, freeing himself from the limitations of his visual angle. Of course, you can still move forward, but what you see under the psychic vision is no longer clear real matter, but a thick fog, and you can no longer see anything else. For Qinxia's next purpose, this distance of more than 20 meters is more than enough. Like a patient predator, Qinxia was waiting at the maximum distance. Soon, a small number of security robots patrolling the corridor lined up and patrolled to this side of the cave. Those security robots were holding electric batons and marching forward with heavy steps. They were not powerful and did not seem as powerful as other things on Nuceria, but these security robots were enough to turn the gladiator's goal of escaping from the arena into a fantasy. They work without sleep and never get tired. What Qinxia wants to do is to turn fantasy into a reasonable goal again. The security robot patrol continued to move forward. These Iron Man-like creatures had no idea that there was a psychic in the cave, but were observing them quietly as if he were right next to them. This is the case with security robots, so if it is a living person, it will be even more difficult to detect it, unless there is a psychic present as well. It's time to remodel. Qinxia raised his arm while sitting in the cave, and took out one of the many things he had previously hidden in the stone, a modified intelligent mechanical processor. Holding the processor in his hand, Qinxia fixed his eyes on a random security intelligent machine, and then his body in the cave raised his hand towards the security intelligent machine outside the cave gate. After completing mental activities such as fully concentrating, calling on spiritual energy, imagining what he was going to do next, and forcing himself to concentrate on imagining what he would look like after achieving his goal, Qinxia opened his eyes. He still had a security robot processor in his hand, but it was not the one he modified, but the one in the head of the security robot he had just targeted. With the help of psychic power, Qinxia has replaced the processor of a security intelligent machine. If an ordinary person wants to do this, he not only has to modify the processor himself, but also has to wait for the right time, find an opportunity to get close to the security robot, and defeat the security robot. He also has to insert the processor into the brain of the security robot without anyone noticing, weld it, and connect it. But for Qinxia, this was just an easy act of replacing one thing with another, without any difficulty. After doing all this, Qinxia opened his eyes, glanced at the sleeping gladiators, and a data tablet appeared in his hand, establishing an information link with the security intelligent machine that he had replaced. After a scrolling loading bar reached its limit, various information about the security robot and its perspective appeared on the data panel. There is even a virtual joystick on the data board that is similar to the operation method of mobile games, which can be used to control various behaviors of the security intelligent machine. Real technology is different from subspationics, and it is very difficult to achieve a goal. Use the modified processor to hack into the security intelligent machine, control its system, establish a link with it with a data board, and even operate and control the security intelligent machine. All of this requires a long program code to implement. Fortunately, the processor of this security intelligent machine is very simple and easy to understand, and it has a unique way similar to automatic code writing, which is to write the requirements directly on the processor, and then the processor of the security intelligent machine will automatically implement the function, provided that this function does not exceed the scope. What's the situation? Qinxia suddenly heard someone talking, and then looked in the direction of the voice using his psychic vision. In the fog beyond the observation range, a guard holding an energy rifle was seen walking towards the security robot patrol team. The guard's target was very clear, and that was the intelligent machine whose processor Qin Xia had just replaced. All other security intelligent machines were operating normally, but this one had just been taken over by the processor modified by Qin Xia. It stayed in place for 1 second before continuing to follow the security logic and keeping up with the team. The guard walked up to the Omnic, took out a data pad and connected it to the Omnic's brain. But the intelligent machine did not stop at all because the guard clicked the stop button, and continued to move forward. In the processor modified by Qin Xia, the data board he got from the previous person in charge of the arena had absolute authority. The guards were even more confused. At this time, Qin Xia concentrated his attention and slowly stretched out his hand while sitting in the corner of the cave. It was like grabbing something and pulling something out. Qin Xia opened his eyes and looked at his hand, which was just holding a ball of air when he stretched it out, but after he retracted his arm, there was now a heart in that hand. It's the same principle as replacing a modified processor into the brain of an intelligent machine remotely. Qin Xia took out the guard's heart from a distance, as easy as taking something from a bag. Qin Xia, who was holding a heart, had a thought, and the whole heart turned into crystal snowflakes floating in the air, then melted in the air and disappeared without a trace. After dealing with a simple emergency, Qin Xia closed his eyes again and entered his psychic vision to observe the situation outside. The guard died, and the alarm on his body began to sound a piercing alarm as the wearer lost vital signs. Soon, a large group of security robots rushed to the place where the guard died. All the automatic machine guns in the corridor began to rotate to search for any non-friendly targets, and the security robots that arrived blocked the corridor. Compared with these very reliable mechanical creations, the human guards seem much more lax. After a while, a few people came strolling over, saw the body lying on the ground, and then conducted a routine check. This idiot seems to have died suddenly, or had a heart attack. He doesn't look injured at all, not even when he fell. Then give him CPR. A young-looking guard squatted on the ground and immediately took out medical equipment to treat the corpse on the ground. The other few people were watching from the sidelines as if to enjoy the fun. After the device that released electric current had operated for several cycles and the corpse's chest was almost electrified with no signs of recovery, the young guard took out a data pad and scanned the corpse. This is impossible. What? This is impossible. There's nothing where his heart is. The young guard responded to his superior's question in astonishment, then checked the body in disbelief and found that there was no cut on the body, but the heart was missing. Schnick vision is removed. Qin Xia opened his eyes, still sitting cross-legged on the ground. He glanced at the others who were sleeping, slowly picked up the data tablet, and opened a book stored in it. The Gods of Nuceria, the Invincible Family of Gods. Het. Qin Xia chuckled, stretched out his finger and ran it across the surface of the data tablet, turning to the next page. The light released by the data tablet illuminated Qin Xia's face in the dark cave, revealing what Qin Xia longed for at any time and place: knowledge. Qin Xia responded to the data board with a look as if he was looking at prey. After reading until the early morning, Qin Xia put down the data tablet. A new day has begun and the gladiators have to go on stage. Qin Xia walked to the wall and looked at the schedule on it. Today is the birthday of the patriarch of the Tark family, and a large-scale gladiatorial fight will be held. In the column on the schedule listing the enemies that the gladiators fought, there were only 3 words: ogre. The names of the gladiators who need to participate in this fight are also marked. Qin Xia saw himself: Angron, Ono, Crest, Yukula. That's about 8 people. But at the end of the list, there were 3 lines of text that shocked Qin Xia. 2 candidate gladiators, to be determined. The requirements for candidate gladiators are as follows. 2 children. Chapter 54. Ogre. Today is the most important festival in Nucria Chief Tark's birthday. Today, Chief Tark will bring a wonderful big fight to all of us Nucrians, as always. He decided to spend this day with every Nucrian and share his joy. And today, 10 of the most valiant and sought-after gladiators will step onto the red sand to face 5 of the most formidable enemies. Maggot Eye soared across the arena, delivering words that sounded as passionate as ever. The host pressed a control button somewhere in the arena, and then the huge gates standing on both sides of the red sand and hot soil in the battle area of the arena slowly opened. Of the 2 gates leading to the fighting area, one gate was for the gladiators to pass through, while the gate opposite the gladiators' residence was for people or things that were not gladiators to pass through. Today is not a regular fight. No matter who comes out of the gate, we don't need to show mercy. Qin Xia walked empty-handed at the front of the 10 gladiators, giving instructions as he walked. This sentence has no value to most gladiators who have been fighting in the arena for many years. They certainly know that the enemies coming out of the gate opposite the gladiators' residence are here to kill them all. Who would show mercy? But not all gladiators are very experienced, such as the 2 new gladiators in the 10-man gladiator team that Qinxia is in now. To be precise, they were 2 little kids. A little girl, looks very young, but her eyes reveal ferocity and determination. The other was a little boy named Yakyuka. This was the boy who came with Yakula's mother when she came to the cave to deliver supplies that day. The 2 children were brought in the morning when the gladiators were having dinner. When Yakula saw his little brother being thrown into the arena, he collapsed. He thought that his mother and Yakula would not be in danger of their lives as slaves outside, and even if the 2 were thrown into the arena for committing a crime one day, they would definitely come in together. Now that only Yakyuka was thrown into fight, Yakula had to believe that something bad had happened to his mother. About your mother. Kleist walked beside Yakyuka. Don't worry if your mother is still alive. Your brother and the little girl were sent in. It's possible that the arena staff just grabbed 2 kids and threw them in here. If that's the case. I don't understand, why? Yakula asked, staring at Kleist with bloodshot eyes. Kleist was speechless for a moment. Ono answered for Crest, to increase the viewing experience. The last time a few kids were sent in and rushed to play with us, the guy we were fighting was called Ogre. Ogre. Yakula looked at Ono. You'll know what I'm talking about in a moment. Ono turned his head, stopped, and stared at the dark corridor inside the giant gate in front of him. The gladiators all stopped. Angron leaned down, raising both axes. Qinxia stood still, staring straight ahead, ready to use his spiritual power at any time. Yakula's prosthetic arm easily held the full-height axe across his body, but before the battle he had one more thing he wanted to ask. Brother. Hearing the call, Yakyuka looked up with a confused look on his face and found that it was his brother Yakula who called him. Our mother, is she still alive? This is not the first time Yakula has asked this question. Yakyuka's answer was the same as the one he gave to his brother all the way here. My mother was assigned to the arena to prepare supplies, and when I woke up I came to this damn place, so I don't know if she is still alive. Well, Yakyuka seemed to sigh, and then protected his brother behind him. Sorry, I asked you more than once. It's just because I was too worried. Seeing his brother nod with a painful expression, Yakula turned his head and looked forward. On the other side of the red sand, in the dark corridor, a heavy sound of footsteps was heard. It was like something huge was walking step by step, and there should be more than one huge thing because the footsteps were chaotic. After the gladiators held their breath for a while, the enemies they were about to face in the fight slowly appeared. 4 huge subhumans came out first. They were terrifyingly tall and strong, wearing iron armor and holding huge axes in their hands, which were swung by heavy chains. Ogren Ape Man. Qinxia frowned and said the scientific names of the 4 subhumans. On Nusaria, the Nusaria people certainly did not call these subhumans Ogrens, that was the name given to this human subspecies by the later human empire. The Ogrens are extremely stupid, but they possess amazing strength. If an Astartes were not wearing armor and attempted to compete with Ogren in terms of strength, it would be easy for Ogren to kill the brainless Astartes. Are they ogres? Yakula subconsciously pushed Yachuka to keep his brother behind him further away from the enemy. No, they are not. Ono shook his head. The 4 Ogrens were stopped by some kind of creature that clamped their joints. The arena had the ability to control them, and even used those things that clamped their joints to control them to strike very domineering postures in exchange for the audience's cheers. Then, in the darkness of the corridor, a monster about 4 meters tall walked out. The body of this monster is roughly similar to that of a human, but it is so strong that it makes people feel hopeless, and its head is shaped like a bull's head. This is an ogre. Ono said, it will definitely attack 2 of our children first. This is what happened in the last fight. I watched it slaughter 20 gladiators alone in the cave, and in the process, it killed 5 children in the team. Qinxia nodded and looked at the monster in front of him. He knew it was the beast man. Look upward. Qinxia saw that the beastman's head had a lot of cable-like things extending to his neck, which was a sign of the butcher's nails. In addition, the beastman was wearing an iron helmet that covered his head and horns similar to bull horns. This is a sign. The world eaters are known for wearing helmets that resemble horns, though they also look like rabbit ears. The world eaters' horned helmets are a unique style of helmet that was inspired by the horned helmets worn by the beastmen of Nusaria. I'll deal with it. Angron walked forward with the axe, turned around and glanced at Qin Xia, asking with his eyes whether he agreed. Qin Xia naturally nodded, then looked at Yakyuka, who was closely protected by his brother Yakula, and the girl next to Yakyuka, and asked with a smile, "Ma'am, what is your name?" Hearing this inquiry, the young girl calmly replied, "Theseus." "Theseus?" Qin Xia nodded, looking at Theseus with respect as if he were a woman rather than a girl. "You must stay with Yakyuka after the fight starts. We will protect." "I can fight," Theseus said calmly, and then she pulled out 2 daggers from behind her waist, which looked more like short swords in her hands. "I can also take care of myself." Chapter 55. The limits of carbon-based organisms. Hoo-hoo! The beastman easily pushed aside an Angron standing in front of him and walked to the front. It was breathing heavily, and its chest, which was as hard as steel, was rising and falling. The gas exhaled by this monster was scalding hot, and in the eyes of bystanders, its nostrils looked like 2 machines that were constantly spewing steam. The eyes, like 2 red gemstones, scanned every gladiator in front of them, and finally settled on Yakyuka and Theseus, who were at the back of the gladiators. 2 children, these were its first target. The surging murderous intent brought by the butcher's nails tormented the beastman all the time. The remaining rationality in its head only allowed it to instinctively select the top priority targets to be brutally killed in battle. Woo 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 woo. The beastman's cries were not deafening, but rather sounded like whimpers of pain. In stark contrast to the painful whimpers that symbolized weakness and incompetence, the beastman's huge body roared like a tank. A humanoid tank made of muscles and steel bones. Anyone who sees it can't help but sigh that this is the limit of the physical strength of carbon-based creatures. Qin Xia only needed to concentrate for less than 2 seconds to crush a person's head, but to crush this ghost thing's head required not only time, but also concentration. Woo! The beastman whimpered again and swung the axe wildly, accidentally chopping off the head of an Angron as he passed by, then continued to run forward without any pause. This humanoid tank even stirred up red sand as it ran, forming a sandstorm that covered wherever it passed. Brother, Yakyuka was so frightened by the scene that his legs went weak and he couldn't move. It was not easy for the boy, who had never faced such a scene, to call out to his brother Yakula. Fear and despair instantly filled the boy's heart, and the emotion was so strong that Angron, who was standing in the front, could sense it. Emotions such as fear, despair, and powerlessness slowly transformed, also transforming in Angron's heart, but compared to a boy who clearly knew that he was powerless, Angron, as the Primarch, when faced with these emotions, felt a rage that wanted to strangle the ultimate source of these emotions. And the ultimate source is the beastman in front of us. Ah! Angron suddenly roared and rushed towards the beastman with an axe in hand. The 2 creatures, both of which were much larger than normal humans, engaged in combat a second later, with Angron charging at the beastman with all his might. After a muffled sound, the beastman's charge was interrupted, and his huge body was actually knocked backwards by the original body. Angron's situation was no better than the beastman. At the moment of the collision, the beastman thrust his giant horns to knock the Primarch away, leaving 2 deep bloody holes on his chest. At this moment, Angron felt that he still had too little combat experience and was not strong enough. But if Qin Xia could hear his inner voice, he would tell him, even if you are an adult and have experienced countless battles, this damn thing that has been strengthened to an unknown extent and has the butcher's nails can still cut you down. The Primarch, who was less than 5 years old, was just about to get up from the ground when the beastman rushed in front of him and chopped him down with a weapon much larger than the axe in his hand. A white barrier condensed, and Qin Xia suddenly flashed in front of the original body, easily blocking the attack with his psychic power. "Get up!" Qin Xia shouted, looking around. The other gladiators had already started fighting with the 3 Angrons, and Yakyuka was running in the opposite direction. The little girl named Theseus looked younger than Yakyuka, but she had a gloomy look in her eyes and was circling behind the beastman with 2 daggers in her hands. While he was observing, the beastman chopped down with an axe, and cracks appeared on the psychic barrier. Qin Xia quickly focused on responding to the attack, and the barrier was restored to its original state. In less than 3 seconds, he withstood several chops from the beastman. When Qin Xia was about to focus all his attention on defending against the attack, Angron stood up, pushed the beastman away, and fought with him. Now Angron became the first obstacle between the children and the beastman, and was therefore attacked by the beastmen with all their strength. Even though the Primarch was young, he was still a demigod after all. This demigod could instantly perceive the weaknesses of the beastmen's bodies, such as the joints and the places where tendons and bones were connected. He could also swing heavy weapons at an extremely fast frequency to hit the beastman's vital points. But no matter how they attacked, the beastman wouldn't even have the slightest pause. The murderous intent brought by the butcher's nails had made it completely incapable of feeling pain, and the scars left in the battle would only give it a momentary relief from the torture of the butcher's nails. Run! Angron roared behind the beastman. The weapons of the Primarch and the monster collided, sparks flew, and the Primarch used his free hand to grab the beastman's neck and head-butted the monster in front of him. The monster was stunned for a moment, then in anger it head-butted Angron, causing the Primarch to stagger back several steps and almost fall. As the beastman tried to pursue the victory, Qin Xia, who was behind the Primarch, released psychic lightning. Frost spread across the red sand, white psychic lightning enveloped the beastman's body, and a burnt smell quickly spread. The beastman roared continuously due to the electric shock, and his huge body retreated several steps and half knelt. I can shock you like this all day long. Qin Xia stared and walked forward. With every step he took, the white lightning released from his fingers became more and more violent, pinning the beastman to the ground. But then Qin Xia stopped releasing psychic lightning because he saw a young figure rushing towards him from behind the beastman. That was Theseus. The Primarch had just shouted run to Theseus who was running behind the beastman, but the girl still kept running forward with a cold and determined look in her eyes. The moment she got close to the beastman, she jumped up and jumped onto his neck, raised the dagger with both hands and stabbed it into the beastman's eyes. The beastman roared in pain, reached out to grab Theseus who was stabbing him non-stop, and threw the girl dozens of meters away easily as if she were a piece of trash. Theseus was still a child after all, and her face was filled with fear, but she finally drew an arc in the air and fell into a layer of ice and snow that existed abruptly above the red sand. Climbing out of the snow, Theseus looked around in surprise. She remembered that there was no pile of snow at all. The girl looked ahead and saw Qin Xia nodding silently to her and retracting his arm. Only then did she realize that it was this wizard who saved her. Of course, a ball of snow could not leave a child flying dozens of meters away unscathed, but Qin Xia did not release a ball of snow to stop Theseus. What he released was a ball of spiritual energy. The ice and snow were just special effects. Turning around, Qin Xia raised both hands towards the beastman, releasing psychic lightning with one hand and spreading the other hand into a claw shape facing forward. Qin Xia stretched out his hand and twisted it slowly, as if he was holding something. Inside the beastman's body, his blood began to boil and his tendons and bones began to twist, as if a giant hand was grabbing his body and twisting it hard. If an ordinary human faced Qin Xia's psychic attack, he would have been dead by now, but the beast man could still hold on for a while. However, Angron, who had just been knocked unconscious by the beastman's headbutt, had recovered by now. The Primarch shook his head, and when the dizziness wore off, he roared and pounced on the kneeling beastman. He grabbed the cable of the butcher's nail extending from his brain with both hands, and pulled it while roaring angrily. The wailing sound rang out again. The beastman was in so much pain that he lost the ability to move. At the same time, his incredibly strong body could no longer resist the psychic attack. Before he died of pain, Qin Xia, who had time to concentrate on calling on psychic energy, twisted his spine apart. Chapter 56. The Hidden Wizard. Come. Qin Xia walked up to Angron and stretched out his hand. Angron wanted to reach out and grab Qin Xia's hand to use it to stand up, but when he thought of his own weight, he gave up. But Qin Xia used a spiritual power to push Angron up from the ground and turned to look at the others. The gladiators are fighting with Angron. Ono held the shield and stood in front. The body of this old bear did not become weaker with age. Although he could only hold the shield to block the force that just brushed past Angron when he swung his weapon, it also attracted Angron's attention and gave other gladiators time to attack him. Kleist held his spear and stabbed continuously, like a primitive man hunting an elephant. Yukula had just pulled the prosthetic arm out of an Angron's head. His younger brother Yukula stood beside him in fear, holding his brother's sword in his hand. He was covered in blood, and he must have also participated in the battle. Yukula seems to be able to adapt to combat easily. Qin Xia said to the Primarch. Angron looked at Yukula. He could sense a lot from this boy's emotions. Fear, anger, the thrill and pleasure of having just participated in a battle. Theseus, who had just rushed forward and stabbed the beastman's eyes during the battle, must have an unknown past. Her past experience taught her how to fight and made her not afraid of the enemy. This was the judgment Angron made when he perceived and analyzed Theseus based on the method Qin Xia taught him before. As for Yukula, he probably had no combat experience and no unknown past. It's surprising that he was still able to participate in the battle. Someone told me before that the genes of the Nuke Ryans have been modified. Qin Xia looked at Yakyuka, who was breathing heavily and even had a little excitement in his eyes. The Nuke Ryan Superman is worthy of his reputation. Am I also a product of genetic modification? Angron suddenly asked. You are, but not a genetically modified product here. While the two were talking, they had already rushed towards the Ogrons. Now Qin Xia no longer needed to fight side by side with Angron to face the powerful enemy. The two gradually separated and each went to help several gladiators. An Ogron had his head chopped off by Angron, who was running towards him from behind. Another Ogron was forced to his knees by Qin Xia's psychic lightning, and was then hacked to death by the gladiators. The last Ogron was stabbed in the leg by Crest's spear. After staggering for a while, Theseus rushed out from the darkness and rode on his neck. He poked his eyes out several times, and then Ono hit him on the head with a shield. In the end, a gladiator named Chromic stepped forward with a brass broadsword, stabbed and slashed at Ogron's heart, and finally killed him. The audience's cheers reached a climax. If it weren't for these two big guys, we wouldn't be able to stop the ogres. Crest lay on the hot red sand, gasping for breath. And what happens then? Angron asked. Then the ogres will kill all the children. Kleist replied, when I was thrown into the arena at the age of 5, all the friends who came in with me died at the hands of the ogres. In the end, it took dozens of gladiators to drag the ogres to exhaustion. The two sides tied and the arena ended. I survived. Hearing this, Angron frowned and looked at Yakyuka and Theseus. The two children had just learned from Crest what they would face under normal circumstances, so they both looked at Angron and Qin Xia with gratitude. The feeling of gratitude and trust made Angron feel as if he was bathing in warm water. The Primarch took a deep breath, smiled and nodded, I'm just sorry that you will become gladiators. After saying this, Angron's eyes shot towards the audience. From the emotions of some of the audience, Angron felt pity. Some are lamenting that they didn't get to see the most visually stunning show the beastman called the ogre had to offer. Qin Xia also looked towards the audience, but he was not looking at the audience, but at the most inconspicuous room among the many VIP rooms. He sensed the psychic energy and discovered its source. Sorrow, this wizard is powerful, right? Tark lay on the sofa, pursed his lips and looked at the noble sitting next to him. The nobleman sat upright, and his every move and gesture gave off the feeling of an old-fashioned aristocrat. It's amazing. Solo nodded. If he can follow the custom, if he can be sent to the Julius family like the wizards who were discovered before, that would be great. No. Turk shook his head. I have other plans for this man. I don't care why your family keeps collecting wizards. Anyway, you should put your mind aside. Sorrow Julius nodded silently. Turk turned over on the sofa and watched the host introduce the winner of the fight. The two watched for a while, and Solo suddenly asked, Sir, tell me, why do people in our world hate wizards so much? Hearing this, Tark took a sip of wine, pondered for a moment, and replied, because the first ruler of Nuceria was a wizard. Those who resisted him at that time were doomed to fail. Until my glorious ancestor, the first Tark, he was guided by the gods to find the ancient arsenal and use technology to defeat the wizard tyrant. Related. Solo nodded. Tark added, history records that the ancestors of your Julius family were also wizards, but they were wizards who helped my ancestors. So your family doesn't still have the methods of using those witchcrafts, does it? Witchcraft ability is not a stable inheritance. Solo looked at Tark with a wry smile, you know the equipment I use. They arm me like a dumpling. If I were a wizard, I would. Okay, shut up. Tark suddenly became impatient and splashed the wine in his glass towards Solo. Do you think I care about your family's shit? Your family is full of bastards except you. Remember I told you that if I ask you about Julius, you only need a short answer. Sarah was neither angry nor annoyed. He gently wiped off the wine on his body and replied with a smile, we grew up together. I have always found you difficult to understand, not to mention making myself behave in accordance with your habits and likes and dislikes. Shut up! Turk said viciously. Solo helplessly spread his hands. The two were silent for a long time. Solo's eyes were fixed on Qin Xia in the arena, and his gaze gradually broke away from the limitations of his subjective perspective. Then their eyes met. The next second, Solo suddenly felt someone hitting his head with a hammer, and he felt that even his spirit was shattered for a moment. Standing in the arena, Qin Xia, who sensed psychic energy and tried to test the source of psychic energy, stared at Silo. After witnessing his reaction, he was extremely sure that this was the source of the psychic energy he suddenly felt. Silo is a psychic. After a long pause, Silo weakly raised his hand and placed it on Tark's shoulder, pretending to be normal and asking, "I hope to choose a guard from the gladiators, is that okay?" "Of course." Turk shrugged. "We are close friends. Anyway, the Colosseum is my private property, and so are the gladiators. So please do as you please." Chapter 57, Tark's Crown. The fight was over and the gladiators returned to the cave one after another. Qin Xia was still paying attention to what was happening in the audience. His psychic vision could not reach so far to observe closely, but when he used his psychic power to defeat the psychic detection from Silo, he projected part of his psychic power onto the opponent's temporarily lost mind, thus achieving the purpose of observing the surroundings through the opponent. The door of the VIP room opened, and a guard wearing butcher's nails walked into the room with heavy steps. Qin Xia discovered that it was the person who came to the manor to pick him up last time, a talkative stone man named Brown. Compared to their last meeting, Brown behaved like a manic lunatic in front of Silo and his master. "I saw your guards." Brown rushed to Silo, grabbed his collar and roared, "The arena around Dizia City is the territory of the Talco family. You can't bring your guards here. Bastard." Silo looked at Tark nervously. Turk looked at Brown and shook his head slightly, "He is my best friend. It's okay to bring the guards here." Sarao relaxed instantly. He was thankful from the bottom of his heart that Turk's mental illness had not yet broken out at this moment. In other words, Turk had a mental breakdown and was still moody, but fortunately, when his chief guard entered the room, Turk was not angry and full of hatred. "Don't do it again, you bastard from the Julius family!" Brown roared at Silo, "Otherwise I will tear your guards to pieces in front of you. And then I will grind them into pieces and stuff them into your dog's mouth." "Yes, yes." Silo nodded repeatedly. Qin Xia observed this scene through Silo and was very surprised. Surprised at Tark's guard, Brown, what position this stone man holds in front of other nobles. The frightened Silo immediately ran out of the room, but Qin Xia could still use him as a focus to continue to observe Brown and Turk for a short time. With only the stone man and his master left in the room, everything calmed down. "Sorrow is my best friend, you don't have to be on guard against him." Tucker motioned Brown to sit down and said. Brown was no longer as manic as before, and returned to the calm and talkative state he was when Qin Xia last saw him. Just as the stone man himself said, his madness was pretended, in order to make others think that he would have normal mania and anger after being hit by the butcher's nails, otherwise others would doubt his identity. "That's easy to say." Brown said helplessly, "Every time I scream and howl in front of others, I act like a brainless idiot. I'm really tired of this kind of life. I can't help it. When you found me and decided to support me in seizing power, we agreed that I would be in the light and you would be in the dark." Turk looked at Brown as if he were a true relative and friend. "You are my crown. It is you who put the power on my head. Otherwise, I would not have the support of my family members. Well, I will kill the whole family of anyone who disagrees in the middle of the night." Brown nodded helplessly. "To be honest, these are nothing. The key is that you said you agreed to turn Nukria into what I told you about, the amusement park." Turk suddenly fell silent, thought for a moment, and nodded. Before Brown could speak again, Tark suddenly ordered, "Sorrow wants to choose a guard from the gladiators. Promise him." "You've already promised him, what else can I say?" Brown responded helplessly. The two stopped talking. They sat together like family, quietly looking at the empty arena. Qin Xia also withdrew his attention. After the fight, the two children, Yakuka and Theseus, were not taken away by anyone, but were also escorted into the cave by security robots. It is conceivable that the two little guys will become young gladiators like Crest who grew up in the arena. Yakula cares for his younger brother Yakula. Theseus, who had no relatives or friends among the gladiators, could only sit alone in the corner, saying nothing. Ono walked up to him and asked about his well-being, but Theseus remained expressionless and did not respond. Angron. Qin Xia walked to the Primarch's side and called him softly, then pointed at Theseus with a finger, "Good opportunity." Angron instantly realized what the good opportunity Qin Xia was talking about. That is to analyze the other person's character by sensing his or her emotions. This is a kind of learning. Ever since Qinxia analyzed Crest last time, Angron has also been training his profiling abilities. So the Primarch and Qinxia walked towards Theseus and sat on the left and right of the girl. Theseus raised his eyebrows and looked at the two big guys, wondering why they suddenly sat next to him. He is the best psychiatrist here. Qinxia pointed at Angron and said, "You can just call him Dr. An." Hearing this, Theseus stared at Angron with a confused expression on his face. Angron began to sense the other party's emotions very seriously. Completely contrary to the Primarch's prediction before serious perception, there was no pain or heavy struggle in Theseus' heart, only ordinary calmness. But Theseus was just a child, even younger than Yakyuka. She shouldn't be a little fighter who dared to poke the beastman's eyes as soon as she entered the arena. Seeing the Primarch's reaction, Qinxia expected that Angron did not sense anything from Theseus. Theseus. This name left a deep impression on Qinxia. Like men like Jakyuka Klschino, Theseus would be a gladiator who participated in the uprising in the future. She could kill a guard with just a few leaps. Qinxia couldn't help but sigh that Nuceria was really a place of outstanding people and beautiful scenery. Theseus, like most of the gladiators here, had amazing fighting power. The carbon-based Gundam among the classics of Nuxing. Qinxia didn't even dare to imagine how strong New Star's male gladiators would be if they were transformed into Astartes in the future. Welcome to the gladiator family. Qinxia extended her hand, Ms. Theseus. Hearing the word madam, Theseus smiled. She didn't like being treated like a child, so when Qinxia called her madam in the arena, she treated Qinxia as a friend. After smiling, Theseus held Qinxia's hand and said, "Are you a wizard?" "As you can see, ma'am." Qinxia sat next to Theseus and looked down at her. "I was a wizard before I became a gladiator. What about you? What did you do before you came to the arena?" Hearing this question, Angron immediately listened attentively. If he had a small notebook, he would write down what Theseus said next in the notebook and compare it with the emotions he felt from Theseus when he had time, so as to study human psychology. "I have no parents. I am just an orphan. I was chosen by the gladiator trainer as the most ferocious and capable fighter in the orphanage," Theseus said calmly, "then they trained me. When I was old enough to participate in gladiatorial combat as a child gladiator against ogres, they sold me here." Qinxia nodded after hearing this. When he was about to ask something else, Theseus stood up and said, "Should we carve the rope of triumph?" "That's right, kid, it's triumph rope time." As Kleist spoke, he came over with a piece of cloth, took Theseus into a corner, and then used the cloth to cover a secret corner for her. Clearly, Kleist knew what kind of help a female gladiator of Theseus' age craved. Theseus looked at Kleist with gratitude, picked up a sharp stone, and carved the rope of triumph on his back. Chapter 58. Worm. Wake up, wake up! The call echoed in Qinxia's ears. Hearing this familiar call, Qinxia first realized that he had fallen asleep. He had not slept on his own initiative since arriving in Nuceria, so he no longer heard the call that would appear whenever he rested. The call that always sounded during breaks made Qinxia feel irritated. He suddenly opened his eyes and found that it was pitch black all around. Angron. "Oh no! Are you guys there?" In the darkness, Qinxia seemed at a loss, anxiously calling out other people's names, as if the calling voice coming from somewhere kept echoing in his ears. Qinxia is afraid of the darkness. This was the consensus of the White Scars Space Marines who had brought him up, so the strike cruiser was always brightly lit. Later, the think tank even used his spiritual power to light a lamp that would never go out, allowing the lamp to accompany Qinxia and dispel the darkness he feared. It was not until the Grey Knights took Qinxia away that the psychic light ball lit by the think tank was dispelled by the Grey Knights with a snap of their fingers before performing the transformation surgery on Qinxia. But they didn't know that Qinxia was not afraid of the darkness itself. What he feared was an emotion called loneliness. As a person who grew up in an orphanage, he could not help but fear being abandoned. "Crest! Where are you?" Qinxia called out again, groping in the endless darkness. It is so dark here that even the modified and enhanced eyes cannot see anything here. He felt that the ground under his feet was not the rock ground in the cave, but he couldn't tell what it was made of. "I'm here." Suddenly a big hand grabbed Qinxia's arm. Angron. The Primarch also groped in the darkness. When the original body's hand held Qinxia's arm, Qinxia realized from his subconscious to conscious mind that he was not abandoned by others and was not alone, and he calmed down instantly. "Wait a moment. Qin Xia calmly concentrated his attention, and then a white ball of light appeared out of thin air, illuminating the surroundings. The original body saw Qin Xia's face in the light and realized that Qin Xia was not panicked, but he felt that the tone and intonation of Qin Xia's voice just now made him sound as if he was very panicked. This is not the point. The two looked around and saw no other gladiators, nor did they find themselves in a cave. Where they were was a huge, breathing tunnel. Thick black miasma filled every corner of the tunnel. It was this miasma that obscured Qin Xia's eyes, making him unable to observe any objects around him just now. We were just carving the rope of triumph, how come we are in this damn place now? Angron looked around, unable to comprehend his situation. Qin Xia has the same memory. He remembered that he was carving the rope of triumph before. After that, everyone gathered together to eat the food that Yukula's mother sent after the last fight with the slaughterer. Then in the blink of an eye, he and Angron arrived at this damn place. It's like having a blackout after drinking too much. Something is moving. Angron was very alert and listened attentively with bated breath. Qin Xia also felt something moving, as if it was breathing. After the two felt it for a few seconds, they suddenly realized that it was the environment they were in that was moving and breathing. We are in the worm's belly. Qin Xia, who knew Nukria well, understood the situation instantly. Although he didn't see what he was in the stomach of, he was sure that it was the stomach of a worm. Because the High Knights of Nuceria had a way of entertaining themselves, which was to use anesthetics to knock out the gladiators, and then throw the gladiators into the stomach of desert worms, while drinking wine and eating delicious food, quietly watching how the gladiators escaped from the worms' stomachs. But we feel like we got here in an instant. Oh, Angron's puzzled expression lasted only for a moment, and was immediately replaced by sudden realization. Damn the anesthetic! Qin Xia immediately walked to the worm's stomach wall, which was as hard and smooth as steel. He stretched out his hand and slid it through the corrosive mucus to feel its thickness. At the same time, he ordered Angron, go and sense whether other gladiators are here. We must make sure everyone can leave here. I can't sense their emotions when they're not here, Angron said firmly. Qin Xia nodded silently, thinking that it was directed at him. He felt that the person who did this was most likely the nobleman named Saro Julius from yesterday. This hidden wizard must have wanted to take revenge on him. How do we escape? Angron looked around. He saw countless passages from the worm's stomach to other organs, but he didn't know which one would allow him to go out through the worm's mouth instead of other exits. Qin Xia remained silent, pressing his hands on the worm's stomach wall and closing his eyes. Frost condensed out of thin air in the worm's stomach wall, where the temperature was over 50 degrees Celsius, and then spread. Qin Xia didn't plan to walk out of the worm's mouth because the success rate was not 100%. As far as Qin Xia knew, if he had not come to Nuceria and Angron had grown up normally, he would have been thrown into the belly of a worm by the High Knight when he reached adulthood. Then Angron escaped from the worm's mouth, but the worm almost bit him to pieces. Considering that Angron is not yet an adult, Qin Xia chose to use a method with a higher success rate. Angron stood by and watched without interrupting. When the sound of ice condensing reached Angron's ears, the part of the worm's stomach wall where Qin Xia was pressing quickly froze, and the ice spread and shattered, eventually creating a circular passage about 10 meters high. The broken worm's stomach wall turned into falling ice crystals and snowflakes, and the artificially created passage looked more like an open-air cave in a snowy mountain rather than the disgusting internal environment of a terrifying giant creature. Legs. Qin Xia smiled proudly and walked in front with his hands behind his back. What is this? Angron followed Qin Xia, looking around as he walked, his head moving like a radar, his eyes flashing with curiosity and happiness. The snowflakes fell on the Primarch's body, making him feel a feeling he had never felt on Nuceria cold. This kind of coolness is very comfortable in a hot environment. Besides, the snowflakes looked beautiful. Angron had never seen such a beautiful natural phenomenon. All the natural phenomena he had experienced before he was captured as a gladiator had been cruel and harsh. This is snow. Qin Xia trudged through the snow with his hands behind his back. Every time he pulled his legs out of the snow, large flakes of icy snow would be stirred up. Snow? Why is there snow here? Angron ran back and forth in the snow around Qin Xia. The snowflakes created by psychic energy also defy common sense. It has only been a few seconds since Qin Xia opened a snowy road on the worm's stomach wall, but the snow has already fallen very deeply. Looking at Angron who was running around him, as if he had forgotten where he was and why he was in such an environment, Qin Xia had a helpless look on his face, but he didn't say much and continued to walk in front with his hands behind his back. He thought of the battle in the manor, and those who were killed by his lightning would also turn into snowflakes. But it is really uncertain what causes the snow-related effects. Maybe it's a special effect. Qin Xia said softly. Then he added in his mind, maybe I am a sultry and artistic youth subconsciously. Chapter 59, Meeting the Stone Man Again. Chief Tark has tacitly allowed you to play this game of throwing the gladiators into the stomach of the worm. Because your Murray family has a good relationship with the Turk family. But you picked the wrong guy, boy. Qin Xia and Angron walked out of the dead worm's stomach. The original body, who was excited by the snowy environment just now, felt a strong sense of detachment when he saw the outside world. Behind them was a cave filled with snow and drifting snowflakes, and outside was boiling red sand and the corpse of a giant worm that was probably several hundred meters long. Qin Xia didn't have any special feeling, he was staring at a place 100 meters away. More than 20 guards, all equipped with weapons called Silver Vine. In front of the 20 or so guards was a young tall knight. In front of the young tall knight was an acquaintance Qin Xia had just met not long ago, the stone man named Brown. Sorry, I don't care what your clan leader thinks. The young tall knight said arrogantly, slaves and gladiators are even lower than untouchables. I can still play with the untouchables in your Tark family's territory, so how can I not play with these gladiators? Seeing the frivolous and arrogant look on the tall knight's face, Qin Xia frowned and clasped his hands together. Feeling the psychic fluctuations, Brown, who had appeared here for some reason and was negotiating with the high knight who had captured Qin Xia and Angron for fun, immediately turned around and raised his palm to Qin Xia, indicating, please let me handle it. Qin Xia looked at Brown. Valise. Valise Murray. Brown was very considerate of the tall knight. Even though veins bulged on his forehead and he looked like he was gritting his teeth, he still called the young tall knight in front of him by his full name out of courtesy. I'm listening, you lackey of the Mad King. Wallace was still arrogant and presumptuous. If you have to fart, just fart. Don't waste my time for amusement. Brown nodded and said, successor of the Murray family, you shouldn't insult me, because... Wallace was listening with a sneer, and when he saw Brown suddenly stop talking in the middle of his words, he raised his eyebrows and looked at Brown. Forget it, I'll just teach you a lesson. Brown gave up trying to persuade her. Then Qin Xia saw Brown's arms instantly turned into two sharp long swords, and his whole body pressed down and rushed forward. In the blink of an eye, he flashed in front of Wallace's 20 guards and finally returned in front of Wallace. The next second, the heads of 20 guards fell at the same time, they knelt at the same time, fell down and died at the same time. This is awesome! Angron exclaimed. Indeed. Qin Xia put his hands behind his back and nodded after hearing the Primarch's call to show that he agreed. But then a trace of doubt flashed across Qin Xia's face, and he turned his head and looked up at Angron. No. Who did you learn this interjection from? Angron was stunned. Remove the word new after the character from now on. Qin Xia retracted his gaze. You little kid, you don't learn well. Angron lowered his head and scratched his skull, muttering in a very low voice, it's just bullshit. Not far from the two of them, Brown was still negotiating with the tall knight. Now you see why the Mad King you mentioned can wear the crown of the Turk family, right? Brown approached the fearless Wallace and suddenly roared, killing you is as easy as killing a chicken. Now shut your stinky mouth and get back to your doghouse with your damn and inferior equipment of the Murray family. Wallace's head was buzzing from the yelling, but he remained fearless. He glanced back at the corpse on the ground, then turned and left. Before leaving, Valet looked at Qin Xia and Angron, gave them a thumbs up, and then turned his thumbs down. This was the gesture that sentenced the gladiator to death. There's a long way to go, hey. Wallace said with a smile, walked to the open space, jumped up and flew into the depths of the desert. After watching Wallace leave, Brown turned to look at Qin Xia. The madness and anger on his face instantly turned into a smile. He raised his hand and greeted, hi. See you again. Qin Xia led Angron forward. Brown approached the two men. You were knocked unconscious in the arena. All the gladiators were knocked unconscious. Then the damned High Knight brought you and Angron here and threw them into the belly of the sandworm for fun. Are you here specially to pick us up? Qin Xia asked. No, I just happened to be here. Brown told the truth, you were not knocked unconscious because some High Knight wanted to make fun of you. You were just taken away by the way. Even if I didn't come, you could have escaped from the worm's belly. I really just came here by the way. Qin Xia nodded. Brown had no need to lie to him. The stone man led the two people forward in the desert. In this place where there was no means of distinguishing directions, he was able to remember every road without any signs, like a fish in water, sometimes turning and sometimes going straight. Brown, the talkative stone man, will of course satisfy his desire to speak to Qin Xia, who doesn't have to pretend to be stupid. The one who just arrested you is called Wallace, from the Murray family. The Murray family is different from the Julius and Tark families. No one dares to mess with them, but they are not strong. The reason is that the Murray family lives in the desert. Their territory is a fortress, which is protected by two void shields. As he said that, Brown turned around and looked at Qin Xia. Do you know what a void shield is? It's the kind that... Qin Xia quickly said that he knew so that Brown wouldn't have to say so much. The void shield is a warp technology. When it is turned on, it will generate a barrier to deflect fast-flying objects or energy into the warp. The principle is equivalent to using the warp as a trash can. As long as you know. Anyway, two void shields are nothing. The Murray family's territory also has an AI installed on an orbital defense facility tens of thousands of years ago. It's not the AI core of the entire defense facility, but the AI of the defense array in the orbital defense platform facility that is responsible for intercepting enemy fire. That ghost thing is really scary. It can identify who is the enemy and who is the friend. If there is an enemy within a circular area with a radius of 20 kilometers, it will directly crack the technological creations used by the enemy. The more advanced the weapons, the more useless they are. Moreover, there is no place to stay or get supplies in the desert. Only the territory of the Murray family has a fresh water generator. Even the natural environment is unfavorable to the attacker. In summary, it is impossible to attack the Murray family. This is why the Murray family is not afraid of anyone, not even my master's face. So don't blame me for not killing Vales. My master needs his support. Brown gushed. Qin Xia did not turn a deaf ear to what Brown said. Instead, she listened carefully and remembered it. Angron didn't understand and didn't want to listen, but Qin Xia's words echoed in his head. It's true that a blessing in disguise. Hearing this, Angron looked at Qin Xia and saw that Qin Xia did not say a word or move his mouth, but was able to project the sound into his head. The Primarch couldn't help but marvel at the wonder of psychic power. I know where we should go when we are ready to step into a more horrible hell and leave the hell of the Colosseum. I have memorized the direction the tall knight flew away. When we fight our way out of the arena in the future, we will go to their home. Hearing this, Angron felt that this was not feasible. According to Brown, it was impossible to capture the territory of the Murray family. There were few gladiators, and there were only about 100 gladiators in the cave, including the two children, Yakuka and Theseus. As for weapons and equipment, don't even mention it. Trust me, I will plan everything. Qin Xia gave Angron a firm look. Angron nodded without hesitation. Trust. Absolute trust. It had not been long since Angron was captured and taken to the arena, but he had already established friendships with the gladiators, even a kinship that went beyond friendship. This is certainly related to the Primarch's talent. The Primarch can sense the emotions of others, and others will be influenced by the Primarch and let down their guard, but more importantly, the gladiators actually provide something that a child needs. That is care, companionship, and concern. And Qin Xia provided Angron with more, which was what a child under 5 years old needed most. It is to teach and let them rely on you. Chapter 60. Mad King. Over. Brown took a few steps and suddenly stopped, looking straight ahead in surprise. Qin Xia and Angron, who were communicating secretly, also stopped and cast puzzled looks at the stone man. A sandstorm is coming. Brown stretched out his hand and pointed his finger forward, trembling all over. At the horizon, the overwhelming dust and sand was like a huge wall reaching straight into the sky, slowly rolling towards everyone. It's just a sandstorm. Qin Xia didn't know why Brown was making such a fuss. Don't say I can use psychic power. I just can't use it. Brown saw Qin Xia pointing at Angron. A big man who is less than 5 years old and nearly 5 meters tall. A middle-aged man who is less than 20 years old and nearly 3 meters tall. Qin Xia said, pointing at Brown. There is also a stone man who has lived for tens of thousands of years. The three of us can kill a regular army. Why are we afraid of sandstorms? Seeing Qin Xia so optimistic, Brown not only did not calm down, but became even more nervous and panicked. That's not a sandstorm. Well, it is, my vocabulary also shows it as a sandstorm. But that sandstorm is made up of a large number of nanobots. They are the cleanup mechanism of the theme world. Brown used gestures to explain to the 230K backward barbarians what the 20K advanced civilized people meant by the cleaning mechanism. Remember the last time I told you that the Northern Hemisphere was later sold to another company by Nukria Entertainment? That company made nomadic tribal simulations, and their profit margins were very low because no one likes to eat sand in the desert. Later, the company stopped doing business, so they found a security company and ordered a company asset removal service. The sandstorm was a removal service. They could clean up everything except the worms buried deep underground. Brown was still able to talk non-stop at this moment, but was interrupted by Qin Xia raising his hand halfway through his words. The stone man looked at Qin Xia, whose face was gloomy and serious, and was silent for a second. Qin Xia turned his head to look in the direction of the sandstorm, and then quickly ran in the opposite direction. Run! There is only one cave nearby. Lord Tark must be in there. Brown ran nearly 100 meters in the blink of an eye and led the way. Follow me. The three of them ran wildly on the hot red sand. The sandstorm soon caught up and covered the place where the worms Qin Xia and Angron had just killed were. Whether it was the corpses of the guards on the ground or the corpses of worms as huge as mountains, they were all decomposed completely in an instant, and then their material composition turned into one of the nanorobots in the sandstorm. When Qin Xia was about to be caught up by the sandstorm, he looked back. Do not know why. The sandstorm looks like red sand all over the sky, which is the state when a large number of nanorobots gather together. Why did Talk come with you? Qin Xia retracted his gaze and asked while running wildly. I told you I came to save you. Brown looked back at the sandstorm nervously before continuing to answer, we travel together for another purpose. What purpose? Take back the gladiator named Crest from the Julius family. Inside the cave. The sandstorm was blocked by the cave's open entrance. Sweet water flowed out of the holes embedded in the stone. Tark, covered in blood, squatted beside the water and scrubbed the blood off his body with his clean noble robe. Qin Xia saw Tark when he entered the cave. After searching for a while, he found Crest lying in the corner. Qin Xia and Angron hurried forward, not bothering to find out why Crest appeared here, and first checked Crest's physical and mental condition. At this point, things weren't looking good for Kleist. The female gladiator's right leg was replaced by a spear, which completely defied the rules of gravity and floated up when Crest lost consciousness, almost dragging its owner into the sky. What's wrong with her? Qin Xia looked at Tark angrily and asked in a roar. Tark was still wiping the blood off his body, as if he was trying to wipe his skin off. Hearing Qin Xia's question, Tark raised his head in a trance. She was taken away by the Julius family and sent to be strengthened and transformed as a guard, but I rescued her. When all of us gladiators were knocked unconscious and Angron and I were lying in the worm's belly. Qin Xia asked. Yeah. Tark nodded slowly. Then the Mad King told him everything that happened on the day when the gladiators fought with the Beastmen and Angron. Including the Julius family, Solo will select guards. Including that night when all the gladiators were knocked out by anesthetic gas and then Crest was taken away. Qin Xia realized that the main purpose of the arena to anesthetize everyone was not that he and Angron were taken away by the High Knight, but that sending Crest to the Julius family was the main purpose. And Brown did come along, and for some reason, Crest was brought back by Tark. I thought about it this morning and regretted it. Tark murmured, Wizard. I consider you a friend. I think if I give Crest to the Julius family, it may affect the relationship between you and me, so I brought her back. Let's go together to find the Julius family, said Stoneman Brown. Brown looked at his master again and grabbed a bloody arm. What's the matter with you? Were you robbed by the slave capture team? Tark retracted his arm and said in a deep voice, the more I thought about it, the angrier I got, so I turned back to the edge of the desert and massacred the Julius family's trading post because they traded with the Murray family without my permission. Sorrow, my dear friend. His father and 2 brothers were in the trading post. I killed them all. At this point, Tark covered his face and burst into tears. I regret it even more, I shouldn't have killed his father and brother, but they scolded me. Sorrow will forgive me, right? After all, it was his father who scolded me first, so I killed thousands of people in the trading post. He will forgive me. Brown looked down at his master. This chatterbox stone man knows how to comfort others, but he doesn't know what to do when faced with Tark, a patient with severe mental illness. Tark trembled and cried for a while, then put down his hand that was covering his face, with a fierce expression. The Julius family shouldn't have contacted the Murray family behind my back. They even dared to buy gems behind my back. If Solo doesn't know his mistakes and the mistakes of his family, then kill him too. After saying this, the crazy Lord Tark looked at Qin Xia. Qin Xia was looking at Tark with a look of looking at a freak, and this look irritated the latter. Chapter 61. Past Events. Why are you looking at me like that? Tark stood up and roared at Qin Xia. You are also at fault in this matter. Yes, that's right. I let Julius choose any guard, but I didn't let him choose Kleist. I regretted it when I knew about your relationship with Kleist. Afterwards, I went to talk to the Julius family because of Crest. They returned Crest who had just been transformed and strengthened, but I killed them. If Crest wasn't your friend, I wouldn't have gone looking for them, let alone killed them. Turk was already hysterical. At this time, Qin Xia couldn't figure out the mental state of a madman, but Angron could experience it firsthand, and he also wanted to observe and figure it out as Qin Xia had said before. From Tark's emotions, Angron felt that this madman regarded Qin Xia as a like-minded friend. Because of the manor incident. From Qin Xia's fierceness, Tark saw that he could cooperate, and even thought that the other party had the same goal as himself. When an unrecognized madman suddenly finds someone like him, he will of course treat the other person as a friend. But Qin Xia looked at him as a madman and a freak from beginning to end, which made Tark very sad. Sorry. Tark squatted down, panting, and no longer roared at Qin Xia manically. You know, I'm not mentally normal. Don't hold a grudge against me for this. Hearing this, Qin Xia frowned, still standing in front of Crest, looking at Tark as if he were a madman. Angron sensed sadness in Turk. Look. Turk suddenly stood up. You wizards can read minds. If you read my mind, you will understand me and trust me. Qin Xia hesitated. Come on, please. Turk put his hands together, tears streaming down his face. I'm not as eloquent as Brown. I can't explain anything, but I don't want you to misunderstand me, read my mind. Qin Xia stepped forward and put his hand on Tark's forehead. White crystal spiritual energy gushed out of Qin Xia's eyes. Tark straightened his body and looked up at the sky. The past of this mad king also emerged in Qin Xia's perception. Tark. This man had no name, and he did not deserve a name. It was only after he became the chief of the Tark tribe that he was called by others. This person is the illegitimate son of the previous patriarch of the Tark family. It was the product of a clan leader who lost control of himself after seeing a slave girl who was too attractive. When the previous patriarch got tired of the slave girl, she gave birth to a boy and gave all her love to her son. The boy grew up in a stable with the slaves. He had no father, but he had many elders who loved him just as much, other slaves. The slaves saved their limited food supplies to raise the boys. The boy's mother is a slave in status but a nobility in spirit. She is kind and loving. She teaches the boy how to empathize with others and how to love others. Although his brother and uncle, named Alan, always tied him to a tree and used him as a target for chopping and shooting, he survived because of love and Nukaria's medicine. When he grew up, the man worked as a servant for his brothers born to noble mothers. He fell in love with another slave of the same status as his mother. The two were married with the blessings of the other slaves. On the night of their wedding day, the man and his wife saw their father, whom they had never seen until now, the previous patriarch of the Tark family. The man's father, accompanied by a dozen guards, said to the man, "Congratulations, my son. I have a gift for you tonight." At night, the man lay on the ground covered with wounds, accompanied by slaves, listening to the screams of his lover coming from the house. The moment he met Brown was the first time a man felt the sun. It was a night. The man, who still had no name like when he was a child, was lying under a tree. His wife, who was smart and beautiful on her wedding day but went crazy after her wedding day, was digging insects from the ground to eat. At this time, a person blocked the sunlight. It was Brown. Brown, the chatterbox, said a lot of words in a long-winded manner, but the man listened and remembered everything. Brown tells the story of the ancient times of the Tark family. The ancient ancestor named Tark was guided by the stone men, and he and the ancestors of the Julius family found weapons and equipment in the temple, and then challenged the nobles who enslaved the Nusaria people. At that time, the first Tark formed a team called the Untouchable Knights, which means knights who were born in the Untouchables and fought for the Untouchables. This Untouchable Knight was the prototype of the later High Knights. Then Brown told the man that your ancestors did not turn Nuceria into a paradise in the ancient times. He thought he could have a better choice, but everyone has witnessed the facts now. Brown said, help me turn Nuceria back into that paradise, and I will let you wear the crown of the head of the Tarko family. The man said, I don't care about that paradise, I just want all the Turks to die. The two sought common ground while reserving their differences and formed an alliance. From then on, the son of a slave girl without a name and surname, and the stone man named Brown, joined forces to rule the Turk family through violence and fear. During this period, he also received help from Salo, an illegitimate son who was also ignored by the Julius family. In the end, the Talco family was tamed after an operation in which 4 people from each family were randomly selected and killed, regardless of their relationship. The man sat on a chair made from the bones of the previous head of the Tark family and put on the crown of the head of the family. On the throne, in front of all the members of the Tark family who were kneeling on the ground in fear, Salo asked, how would you like to name yourself? As a recorder, I need your name. Tark, said the man. The only one, the last one. Tark. From today on, those of you who have been selected will be able to fight for my cause. In slum number 14 in Dizia city, Tark sat on the throne of bones, suspended in the sky, looking with compassion at these untouchables whom he had narrowed down from 100,000 to 1,000. His gaze first turned to the general of the guards, who was also born a slave and was selected through an extremely cruel screening process. Then glance at these cruel, cold-blooded survivors. You are the best, you are the chosen ones, I saved you through a killing that brought you mercy and liberation. But compared to those who were killed, you are unlucky because you still have to continue struggling in this hell with me. Join me and fight to the death. In this hell of Nuceria, there is only death. The survivors glared at Turk. But when the guards brought up table after table of sumptuous food and gorgeous clothes, the survivors almost immediately decided that Tark was the person they needed to follow. Why do you reward us with food that only nobles can eat? A female slave boldly questioned Tark. She couldn't understand the character of this Mad King. She didn't know why the Mad King ordered the massacre of Slum District 13, but now distributed food to the survivors who killed the guards and other people. Chin Xiao recognized that this female slave was the personal servant who served Tark on the day he had dinner with her. Because you are alive and not dead. Tark's eyes were filled with pity. You have not been freed like the other dead. You will continue to struggle in this hell. How can I bear to treat you cruelly? Eat slowly, you who continue to suffer. I'll wait for you to finish eating and resting, and then we'll go together to liberate 99% of the people in the next slum. Turk vowed to bring his own suffering to others. He established more horrific and cruel punishments and screening mechanisms for slaves, selecting those who stood out from the suffering and fear, and bringing these people with him and giving them important positions. He treated everyone except himself and Brown with an attitude comparable to that of livestock. He married his 2 daughters to the captain of the guard, who was born a slave and was known for his cruelty and brutality. When he suddenly wanted to see his daughters, he heard from the captain that his 2 daughters had fallen to their deaths. He just sighed with regret, it seems that they are free. But it's a pity that I didn't get to see them for the last time before they were freed. He found various ways to toy with and torture the people of the Tark family. When he was in a good mood, he would kill 2 of them, when he was in a bad mood, he would kill 2 of them. When he was in an even worse mood, he would slaughter them door to door until he was in a good mood. The slave owners really deserved to die. But he ordered his guards to go into the slums to kill people, and those who survived in the slums would be selected by him as members of his guards. All of this stems from an unshakable belief that Turk, who had gone crazy during some period of his growth, firmly believed in. That is, in the hell of Nuceria, all living people must be tested by suffering, whether they are slaves or nobles, and those who fail to withstand the test will die. Death is a release from hell, so it is a gift. Only those who have passed the test of suffering, such as he, are qualified to accompany him in a great cause to destroy the hell that is Nuceria. Whether they were slaves, untouchables, or nobles. In Tark's eyes, they are divided into 3 categories: passed the test, failed the test, and not qualified to take the test. No one from the Tark family was qualified to be tested, nor were most of the other nobles. Under the desperate reign of terror, the members of the Tark family were unable to resist and could only seek a moment of spiritual relief from the outside, such as abusing those who were lower than themselves. Those young golden armored knights who were killed by Tark's scheme are typical examples. Chapter 62. Urgent situation. You don't deserve any sympathy at all. When the fluorescence in Qinxia and Tok's eyes faded, Angron roared angrily. The Primarch's roar even stirred up the dust on the ground. When Qinxia retrieved the things from Tark's head just now, Angron also felt the emotions revealed by those things. Those strong and extremely detailed emotions allowed him to deduce most of the things. You mean? I am equally cruel to slaves and untouchables. Tark squinted at the Primarch. No, although I also wield the butcher knife against them, I love them. This is the biggest difference between how I treat them and how I treat my family. I love them, so I let them go. I love them, so those among them who have passed the test of suffering can follow me, but I also have mercy on these people, because if they follow me, they will struggle in this hell with me, and they will not be freed for the time being. Turk's expression was sad and gentle. My slaves, they have all been screened through suffering and torture, so I treat them well. Such a noble, strong companion who trudged through hell with me. At this point, Turk paused for a moment and shed 2 lines of tears. These fellow travelers. How could I bear to continue to abuse and demand too much from them after they have passed the screening? Angron was stunned. The Primarch's brain was nearly overloaded. The extreme and terrifying emotions coming from Tolkay filled the Primarch with fear from the bottom of his heart. When this hell disappears in the future, I will write a book. Turk opened his arms like a saint. In a peaceful and tranquil Nuceria, future generations will know my purpose and my great cause through my book. As soon as he finished speaking, Qinxia asked with a smile, what book do you want to write? Super Madman in Action? Tark immediately cast a dissatisfied look at Qinxia. You have read my mind but you still don't trust me? How can I gain a friend like you, a fellow traveler like Brown and my other slaves? Qinxia was silent for a moment. Turk waited for the answer. Brown looked at Qinxia nervously, afraid that he might accidentally drive Turk crazy again. But after thinking about it, Qinxia raised a finger and said, I have one condition. From now on, you will make weapons and equipment for the gladiators. Don't make them advanced. Just make them with good materials and simple functions. Turk saw a glimmer of hope and tilted his head to ask, and you will join my cause? Of course. Qinxia nodded and stretched out his hand, let's go together. Only a fool would work with this lunatic. This madman won't live long. I've worked with him before, and I might get retaliated against. We have to plan to run away quickly. The sandstorm has dissipated. Qinxia, Angron, Tark, and Brown sat on a plane made of stones and headed towards the city of Dazia. Kleist, still unconscious, lay in the trunk of the plane. Tark touched his ring, and the ring used the stones in the desert to piece together an airplane, which Brown could actually drive. Qinxia, sitting in the back seat, was communicating with Angron using psychic power. But you just said you wanted to help him. Angron was puzzled. I have to find a way to get us some weapons support. Qinxia calmly conveyed the message to Angron, I can guarantee that this madman will not survive this year. We must prepare early and leave the arena. But you said before that the arena is the less terrifying corner of hell. If we leave the arena hastily, we will most likely die. Angron asked. Yes, it is still the same now. Qinxia nodded, but I thought of a good place to make up for the difference in numbers and equipment. In addition, Qinxia suddenly stopped communicating using psychic energy. The reason was that he had originally wanted to explain it to Angron in a simple sentence, but then he felt that the Primarch should learn to analyze and think. With this purpose in mind, Qinxia began to explain his ideas to Angron in detail. I concluded that Turk would not live long. Qinxia already knew from Tark's mind how this madman ruled others. He tortures everyone equally. The way Tark manages the nobles is the same as the way the High Knights manage the untouchables, that is, through Brown's superior individual combat power and the crushing advantages of the advanced technological creations he uses, he rules the power from top to bottom. This is the same as how the High Knights treated the untouchables. Tark treated others with the same attitude as the High Knights treated the untouchables. But the difference is that the untouchables really have no way to resist Tark, while those High Knights among the nobles who also possess advanced technological creations are not absolutely unable to resist. Even the slaves and untouchables who were suffering cruel hardships would not support him, and the attitude of the nobles can be imagined. Under Tark's rule, the desperate members of the Tark family will eventually take the path of rebelling against Tark. Those other High Knight families that have grudges against Tark have probably already been targeting Tark. With the cooperation from both inside and outside, Turk is doomed to die. Uniting the majority of people and turning them into friends and helpers is the truth, Qin Xia concluded to Angron. But Tark is just the opposite. He slaughters and abuses everyone equally. He is still alive because the technological creations he uses are too powerful, and because the stone man named Brown is too powerful. In addition, Qin Xia has another basis for making such a judgment. That is, Tark existed when Angron was less than 5 years old, and when Angron grew up, Nusaria remained unchanged. This only means that Turk will be killed by someone else. Looking at Tark from the perspectives of analyzing the current situation and inferring the future outcome, Qin Xia is certain that this madman will not live long. Then we must be prepared. Angron sighed after thinking it over and over again. The plane landed quickly in the city of Dazia. After sending Tark home, Brown flew the plane to send Qin Xia and Angron. When they arrived at the arena and were about to say goodbye like last time, Brown suddenly called Qin Xia. Tark can make Nukria return to the paradise it once was, right? If not, then I support you. Brown said so. He doesn't want Nukria to return to the amusement park it was tens of thousands of years ago. Qin Xia said, whether you believe it or not, I can tell from his mind that he has no such intention. He is deceiving you. Brown frowned. What about you? What do you think? Wouldn't it be good to turn Nukria back into an amusement park? I just want this hell to return to the paradise it once was, where humans have fun and the stone men and iron men serve them, just like the purpose for which these two groups of stone men and iron men were created. This is my dream. If you agree with me, I will stand on your side. Nukria may become anything. Qin Xia looked at Brown seriously, but it will never become the so-called paradise you mentioned. Your home, your creators, and most of your compatriots have disappeared together. You will never be able to find them again. Hearing this, Brown left in anger. With every step the stone man took, his anger would dissipate a little and his head would lower a little. Until the end, Brown looked like a lonely and sad child. Qin Xia spread his hands helplessly and opened his mouth to say something comforting, but he didn't know what to say. Brown got off the plane again, carried the unconscious Crest into Angron's arms, then returned to the plane and drove away. Chapter 63 Dream. Kleist woke up on the operating table. This strong female gladiator found it difficult to even lift her eyelids at this moment, and focusing and moving her gaze almost exhausted all her strength. What comes into view is a room with walls made of strange bricks. A doctor wearing white clothes and holding a spear with Murray's prosthesis printed on it was cutting something. Kleist turned his head. The pink bricks on the wall look very strange. Hey, lady! A voice came into Kleist's ears. The female fighter turned her head and looked in the direction of the voice, and saw a brick with eyes and a mouth on the wall talking to her. Then all the bricks opened their eyes and mouths. Save us! Kill us! You must come back in the future! You must come back! To free us! The doctor's words interrupted the bricks begging and yelling. What? The people from the Julius family asked us to send this person out immediately. The communicator hanging from the doctor's ear glowed. This is just the beginning of the transformation. Okay, since the Julius family has promised to pay the full amount, then we'll finish the renovation. We won't lose money anyway. Kleist woke up from his dream, and what he saw was a cold rock layer right in front of his face. She turned her head in panic and found herself flying in the cave where the gladiators lived. When she looked at her right leg again, she found that it had been transformed into a spear. The spear releases energy and eliminates gravity. Come down quickly! Ono shouted to Crest while standing on the ground. The gladiators were all in a panic. It was obvious that Crest's flying into the air was a sudden event and no one had time to react. When Qin Xia wanted to raise her hand and use her psychic power to pull Crest to the ground, Angron took 2 steps, kicked off the wall, and pulled Crest to the ground from nearly 10 meters away, then used his body to block Crest and the ground to prevent her from falling. Sorry, we were all numb last night. Ono squatted down and tied Crest's leg, which had been transformed into an anti-gravity spear, to the stone. Qin Xia looked at Crest, recalling everything that had happened before. He remembered now that he and Angron had found themselves in the warp for a split second before they awoke in the belly of the worm. If that moment was related to the anesthetic, it means that the anesthetic can temporarily cut off the connection between the soul and the body. And then I was transformed. Crest patted the anti-gravity spear connected to his knee. The gladiators were silent. Ha! Kleist suddenly laughed heartily, looked at Yukila, and raised the leg with the anti-gravity spear. But fortunately, now I don't have to go to the armory to get the spear to protect you and your brother. Yukila held his brother Yukila's hand and forced out a grateful yet bitter smile. Why is the atmosphere so heavy? Crest floated up, cut the rope connecting his legs to the stone, and did 360-degree somersaults in the air. At least I'm using the Murray family's prosthesis now. We can't afford this damn thing even if we sell all of us. I can still fly and spin in the air. The gladiators remained silent. Angron frowned. All the Primarch felt from Crest was sorrow and pain. Even the gladiators themselves were unaware that they felt what Angron felt. Do you have to look at me like this? Crest stopped forcing a smile and fell to the ground. Leave her alone. She needs some quiet time, Angron said to the others. The gladiators dispersed silently. Crest rejected Ono's consolation and sat quietly in the corner, staring at the anti-gravity spear under his knees. The Primarch sat next to Crest. Crest wanted Angron to stay away from her, but when she was about to say this, her heart suddenly calmed down. Pain flowed from Crest's chest like a stream of water, flowing towards Angron. Angron's eyes were red as he placed his huge hands on Crest's shoulders. Crest and the Primarch didn't need to say anything, Angron knew how she felt and could soothe her soul without words. I don't want to be like this. Crest leaned on Angron's forearm. Angron nodded. He knew that what Kleist said meant a lot. Kleist hopes she can be beautiful and gentle. She doesn't want to tease Yukila's mother. She likes men, especially handsome and capable men. But she needed to make herself become what she acted like. She exercised her body, she pretended to be aggressive. In the arena, a corner of a horrible hell with some rules, how can a girl survive without being bullied and becoming a slave among slaves? The answer is like Kleist. Looking at Angron, who was holding his breath and not moving, letting Crest lean on him, Qinxia smiled, his eyes calm and firm. Apparently, there are some important things that the Primarch does not need to be taught by others, such as how to treat mortals as human beings. Angron is normal now. Considering what the slave owner might do to him in the future, Qinxia made up his mind not to let Angron be nailed with the butcher's nails no matter what. If the price of not bearing the butcher's nails was that Angron would have to take on the most dangerous combat missions and face the most terrible enemies before he grew up, then even if he would eventually die, he would rather not bear the nails and maintain his true self's death. Chapter 64. Uprising Plan Night. The food that Yukila's mother had sent a few days ago was almost gone, and the gladiators were eating the last bit, gathering together and listening as they ate. Qinxia used his psychic power to present a map of the desert. He and Angron stood in the center of the crowd and explained the way out that he had suddenly come up with. That is to find a way to seize the territory of the Murray family. But you said before that we have to be well prepared before we can get out of this hell and move towards a more terrifying hell. Yukila said, looking at the point pointed out by Qinxia on the desert map. Yes, that's right. Our goal is to escape and live freely and with dignity, rather than being chopped into pieces as slaves by the High Knights. Qinxia looked at Yukila. We need a place to live after we leave the arena. This place must be able to protect us and allow us to develop and grow in it. The fortress territory of the Murray family is such a good place. Qinxia then told Brown what he had heard about the Murray family. The most important thing, of course, is how secure the Murray family's territory is. Crest listened quietly, but his thoughts were not on the fortress territory, but on the dream before he woke up. That strange room, the talking bricks. I'm not against it, but objectively speaking, that place is very easy to defend and difficult to attack, someone said. Under normal circumstances, when two armies are at war, it would be a pipe dream to want to take over their territory. Qinxia looked at the speaker, but we don't need to rush over like a swarm of bees, and then a large number of people start to attack the city under firepower. We have to sneak in. I'll find a way for us to get past every high-tech surveillance and security device we can think of. If my research on my talent goes as smoothly as before, I may even be able to teleport us directly over the city walls and defense lines into the interior of the territory. Then we will launch an attack on the Murray family when they least expect it. If we can control the residents of their core family members, or if we find something that can control the fortress territory, we can occupy it. Qinxia said this and looked at the others. The gladiators felt that this plan was too risky. Although most people are aware of the strengths and weaknesses of the gladiators. The disadvantage is that there are too few people and the equipment is not good enough. The advantage is that their individual combat power is very strong. Not to mention Angron, who kills people like killing chickens, and his ability to directly kill the Golden Knight by bypassing the armor with countless defensive technologies. The other gladiators are not ordinary people either. Those present now are all strong people who have been manually selected. It would be difficult for any gladiator here to kill a guard equipped with silver vines, given the huge disadvantage in weapons and equipment. Everyone knew their own strengths and weaknesses, but the weaknesses were too great, and the Murray family's territory sounded really intimidating. Ono once led an insurgent army. Someone looked at Anonymous. What do you think if we leave the arena and fight a guerrilla war against the enemy in the mountains? You will die without a burial place. Ono answered without hesitation, after you die, videos of you doing all kinds of disgusting things will be circulated. Regardless of whether you did those things or not, in the eyes of the civilians we want to protect, we are all a bunch of stupid bastards who eat our own shit and gather together to form a small rebel army. I think so too. Qin Xia agreed very much. He knew that if he did not appear on Nuceria, Angron would sooner or later fight his way out of the arena with the gladiators, and then they would fight guerrilla warfare, taking a city, killing everyone inside, and then moving on to the next city. The predecessor of the name World Eaters was City Eaters, which is the original origin of World Eaters as the name of the legion. Until the end, the rebels were blocked on the cliffs of a mountain area called Deshiai. If it weren't for the shining appearance of the best and most loving father in the galaxy, Angron would have died together with the gladiators. But that may not be the case, Qin Xia thought. After all, if Angron had not been taken away, he could have stayed and helped the gladiators as a powerful fighter. The best outcome might be to continue fighting guerrilla warfare forever. I will not increase the Knight's propaganda attack for now. Qin Xia continued to explain. We don't have anything we need, and we're even outnumbered. If we want to continue fighting after we get out, we'll have to rely on supplies from the civilians in our activity area. But the High Knights can easily turn our activity area into a no-man's land. The rule of slave owners does not rely on the need to recruit a large number of soldiers from the civilian class, nor does it need the support of the civilian class. Under normal circumstances, the ruling structure is pyramid-shaped. Nuceria is also pyramid-shaped, but in reverse. The power of the slave owners is the huge part behind the top of the pyramid, and the power of the civilians is the small part at the top of the pyramid. In order to make the gladiators understand, Qin Xia also created an illusion of a pyramid to assist in the explanation. In the arena, there is a kind of Iron Man called Security Robot. Everyone has seen it. This kind of Iron Man can also be used for manufacturing. Slave owners don't even need civilians to produce. Under these circumstances, I think the probability that the slave owners will turn our activity area into a no-man's land is 100%. To be honest, guerrilla tactics are not advisable here. After saying that, Qin Xia looked at Ono. Ono nodded. In fact, they will do more cruel things, such as preventing the killing of all the people in a city. Back then, our rebels had to avoid contacting civilians because once the slave owners suspected that someone was helping us, they would send out intelligent machines to clean up the entire population of a place. Hearing this, Yukila raised his hand. Qin Xia signaled that Yukila could speak. Slave owners don't need civilians at all, then why do we still exist? Yukila asked tremblingly. Well, this is a cruel question. Qin Xia rubbed his nose and looked at the desert map he created. He was silent for 2 seconds. Just like the civilians who can feel alive by watching us die, the value of most people in this hellhole is to allow a few people to gain a sense of superiority through comparison. Yukila looked at Kleist, then at his brother Yukileka, and then fell silent. Qin Xia waited for others to express their opinions. Everyone was silent for a while. Crest, who had been silent the whole time, spoke up. In fact, the choice before us is basically the same as no choice at all. No matter how crazy Turk is, we can still profit from him, and our situation can be better than before. If we replace him with a more cruel manager, we will die whether we leave the arena or not, so why not give it a try? After that, Crest was the first to raise his hand to express his approval, believing that the idea of attacking the territory of the Murray family was the best option, and guerrilla warfare was not advisable. This plan to seize the territory of the Murray family is crazy, but it's the best I can come up with. Qin Xia looked at everyone. Crest is right. No matter how crazy Tark is, at least we can communicate with him and even profit from him. If Tark dies and is replaced by a normal slave owner, we will be living a life worse than death. But there's no need to rush. We need to conserve our energy and be prepared. We have to wait for the weapons and equipment that Turk promised to be delivered. If we are going to step into a more brutal hell, we must do our best to be prepared. After hearing this, the gladiators thought about it and nodded. I'm going to die anyway, so it's better to die more heroically than to die in the arena. I don't ask for much. I'd consider it enough if I could just kill a slave owner and die. Qin Xia stared at the ground and thought calmly amid the voices of approval. The reason why he proposed the plan to break out of the arena today was fundamentally because of Tark. Tark agreed to provide weapons and equipment, which solved the most difficult problem for the gladiators when they tried to break out of the arena, which was to use their own crowns to collide with the black technology. Whether Tark is dead or alive, it has little impact on the goal of getting out of the arena. Qin Xia also thought about getting weapons and equipment from Tark, but he didn't expect it to be so fast. In addition to the previous preparations, hacking into the processor of the security intelligent machine, observing the route, and the experience of evacuating under siege. This is what Qin Xia wanted to prepare in the arena. But when it came time to fight, Angron, the Primarch, had not only accumulated sufficient combat experience in battle, but also grown up as a Primarch. Thinking of this, Qin Xia looked at Angron. Angron's massive body, nearly 5 meters tall, was squeezed in the crowd, his face still showing a childish expression. Qin Xia couldn't help complaining in his heart, does Nikai's flax medicine contain hormones? Chapter 65, The Blade Principle. In preparation for future events, the gladiators adjusted their schedules. Although it was still daytime, the last regular fight had already ended and the gladiators were resting. They have to ensure that they are most alert at night to cope with any actions that may take place at any time. Qin Xia still sat cross-legged on the ground, exploring and studying his psychic talent. As a person with complicated experiences, Qin Xia will never forget his first encounter with the White Scars warriors. It was a pitch-black night, and all the people were caught and put into cages. The rebels who believed in Angron wanted to put everyone in the cages, and then put the cages under the forging machines used to forge huge steel, and squeeze them into blood. At this critical moment, a psychic rift tore through space. A blue lightning rushed out from the crack, instantly wiping out several rebels around people. Then, the librarian wearing Terminator armor released lightning with one hand and walked out of the rift with a staff in the other, followed by 6 Astartes holding grenade launchers. Including the librarians, there are 7 Astartes in total. Just these 7 people carried out a unilateral slaughter of the rebels like a slaughter. This was certainly because the gap between the Astartes and mortals was astonishingly large, but the bigger reason was that the think tank opened the psychic gate in the middle of the rebels, which was too unexpected. Qin Xia wanted to find a way to open the psychic gate and teleport a group of people to another place. Even if the distance was only a few dozen meters away, it would be enough to assist what he was going to do next. Qin. Hearing the call, Qin Xia opened his eyes and found Ono sitting next to him with a flushed face, wanting to talk about something. In fact, you don't need to ask for our opinions, nor do you need us to participate in the decision-making. Ono's expression was serious. Before, you only needed to inform us when you made a decision, and then briefly explain your thinking. Qin Xia raised his eyebrows, looking puzzled. He didn't know why Ono said that. There is a principle among gladiators called the Blade Principle. Ono spoke slowly and told the story step by step. In the arena, dispersion and chaos is the beginning of death for everyone, so the gladiators spontaneously formed a kind of rule recognition. That is, in the arena, you must immediately choose to obey the orders of one person, no matter if that person is stupid or smart, strong or weak, as long as he is the first person the gladiators think of, then everyone must obey the orders of that person. Everyone must unite immediately when facing a powerful enemy, forming a sharp sword, and the person everyone chooses to obey orders is the blade of this sword. This is the sword edge principle. Qin Xia was immediately surprised when he heard what Ono said. He didn't expect that the gladiators, as a group of brave and aggressive people, actually had the sword edge principle that could help everyone quickly become disciplined and obedient. Then why didn't I see anyone obeying anyone's orders during the previous large-scale gladiatorial fights? Qin Xia asked. Which large-scale gladiatorial fights required us to make sacrifices and unite together? Ono asked back, your witchcraft is too powerful. When we faced the Slayers, we just gathered together to form a shield formation and you twisted the necks of the 5 Slayers into a knot. Then there was no need for unity and order, because everyone could only chop the escaped slave knights. When we faced the ogres, we only subconsciously made preliminary combat countermeasures, and then you and Angron quickly dealt with the ogres, and the battle was over quickly. Qin Xia thought, it's true. Angron is too young, and I feel, he is easily sentimental. Ono looked at Angron who was sleeping. If everyone is going to go to a more cruel hell, you are the only blade, you don't need to explain anything. If we die because of your decision, then we will die, even if we die with honor. Ono continued. Use your own blood to draw a bright red end to the rope of triumph. But some things still need to be explained, because Jianfeng must ensure that we die with a clear mind. At least we should know whether our sacrifice is glorious, and whether everyone thinks that the sacrifice is glorious after our death. Qin Xia understood what Ono meant. What the old bear meant was that when discussing the plan with the gladiators before, explaining the purpose was necessary, but seeking opinions was not. This is also why almost 99% of the gladiators at that time did not express their opinions or participate in decision-making. It was not that they were angry but dared not speak out, nor that they could not think of what to say, but they just silently adhered to the sword-edge principle. I am surprised by the orderliness of the gladiators. I thought I would need to use some means and spend some time in the future to make the gladiators disciplined. Qin Xia sighed. Gladiators are born in battle and grow up in battle, and the most important thing in battle is discipline, said Ono with a smile. Then the old bear picked up a bone from the ground and broke it easily. We know that the power of an individual is limited and insignificant, but if we unite together, obey one person, and fight as a collective, we can turn defeat into victory even if we are at a disadvantage. It's like the difference between a sword and a dagger. A very small dagger can't penetrate armor, but swords and larger spears can. As he spoke, Ono picked up a handful of bones, held them in his hand, and stabbed the air like a sword. Qin Xia, who thought Ono wanted to grab a handful of bones for him to break, had already stretched out his hand to take the bones, but when he saw Ono was drilling the bones together and stabbing them out, he withdrew his hand in embarrassment. Although we are at a great disadvantage. Qin Xia looked around the entire cave, but I can guarantee that we can defeat the regular army that is several times larger than ours and take over the territory of the Murray family that the High Knights dare not covet, because we have what we are good at. That's right. That's right. Ono stood up. I have a feeling that we can burn all the filthy and corrupt things on Nuceria to ashes. This is a fact that is bound to happen. Qin Xia smiled and nodded. Chapter 66. Changes. A week has passed. The gladiators fought and lived their normal lives. Tark violated the agreement he had made with Qin Xia. The fasting day in the arena was not cancelled, and the gladiators had not received any supplies for several days. Cheers are still heard in the arena every day. Maggot Eye still hosted the show with a passionate voice, but the tone sounded slightly different from before. The arena near Dizia, the largest city in Nuceria, remains the same every day. But outside, the situation was turbulent. Until today, a week later. After a regular fight, the gladiators gathered together, and Angron sat in the center of the crowd. Crest used the anti-gravity spear's function to float and came in front of Angron. When the Primarch nodded slightly, Crest swiftly and accurately slashed the Primarch's wrist. Bright red blood flowed out of the wound on Angron's wrist like running water. Everyone looked calm, and it was obvious that this was not the first time in the week that Turk had violated the agreement and not cancelled the fasting day. Yakyuka, Theseus. Qin Xia called out, it's still the same old rules. You two little ones go first. The calm little girl Theseus nodded silently, stepped forward, grabbed Angron's arm, and drank the blood that flowed out. Then there was Yakyuka, Yakyuka's brother. After drinking a few mouthfuls of the Primarch's blood, he felt full, and then Yakyuka felt particularly energetic. After smacking his lips, Yakyuka smiled and said, Hey man, next time I'll ask my mom to send you some candy, maybe it can improve the taste. When Yakyuka heard his brother mention his mother, a sad look appeared on his face. The brother's mother hasn't brought them any food since the food shortage. I heard that ogres always target children because they think they are delicious. Maybe my blood will become fragrant after eating you. Ouch! Angron made a scary face and stretched out his big hand to grab Yakyuka. Yakyuka was unable to dodge and was caught in the Primarch's arms, and then was tickled by the Primarch's free hand. Amid the laughter of the crowd, Angron let go of Yakyuka and signaled that the others could drink his blood. The gladiators took turns to feed on Angron's blood. It was not known whether Angron could control the time it took for wounds to heal, or for some other reason, but when the Primarch finished feeding the last person's blood, his wounds healed in an instant, only deepening the scars left by the previous several feedings of blood. The gladiators called the scar blood grace. I feel your blood is aphrodisiac. The gladiator named Chromic suddenly said, now I think Kleist is handsome. Oh? Do you want me to massage you with this spear? Crest raised his right leg and pointed the anti-gravity spear under his knee at Chromica's chest. Forget it, ma'am. Chromic quickly avoided the question. But the words of this gladiator, who always used a brass broadsword in battle, opened up a topic, namely the magical power of Angron's blood. Gladiators share their feelings after consuming the blood of the Primarch. Angron listened to everyone's conversation with a smile. He fed so much blood to everyone, but his face did not turn pale, his heart did not beat fast, and he did not feel uncomfortable. The Primarch felt satisfaction and gratitude from everyone who had their fill, so he was very happy now. Qin Xia stood aside and watched without saying a word. He also drank Angron's blood and felt equally energized and cheerful. Angron is even more powerful than a cow that eats grass and produces milk. He doesn't need to eat anything to produce enough blood to feed 100 people. He can even produce and sell it himself, feeding himself, achieving a perpetual motion cycle. The Emperor is indeed a great god in the field of genetics, and the Primarches he created are truly extraordinary. Thinking of this, Qin Xia couldn't help but sigh in his heart. I dread to think how envious Angron's legions will be when they learn that their fellow Gene Fathers fed their hunger on the blood of their Primarch. After thinking about the original body, Qin Xia looked out the iron window. Although the arena remains calm these days, some subtle changes can still be seen in the arena. Turk broke his earlier agreement to cancel the fasting day, and while his violation seemed reasonable, after all, he was a lunatic, it was irrational when considered in light of other signs. First of all, the security of the arena was replaced, and the people patrolling in the audience seats were all new faces. Then, there were fewer nobles coming to the arena, and the noble private rooms that were originally packed were all empty for a week. This made Qin Xia suspect that Tark was in trouble. Are you thinking about that Mad King? Ono approached Qin Xia and asked in a low voice. Yes. Qin Xia nodded. Since Qin Xia had told him about the Mad King Tark before, Ono had been thinking about the relevant matters these days, and had a question in mind. Why are you so sure that something will happen to Tark? He has been the ruler for 4 years. If something was going to happen, it should have happened long ago. Hearing this question, Qin Xia stared intently outside the iron window. After a brief silence, he continued to tell the story. Tark has a very good relationship with Salo, the offspring of the Julius family's patriarch. If Tark didn't have the support of the Julius family, he wouldn't have been able to become the patriarch so smoothly. After becoming the patriarch, he in turn supported Salo, who was an illegitimate child, and made Salo the current Julius family patriarch. Then, Turk doubted whether Salo really supported his goals, his crazy goals, and there was a conflict between the two. Until a week ago, when Angron and I were taken to the desert by the High Knights, Tark killed many members of the Julius family. Honor listened and nodded. But he didn't actually understand, because these nobles' family affairs seemed meaningless to him and were of no use other than proving that slave owners were real beasts. To say that Tark had offended a great noble, he had offended more than just the Julius family, and he had toyed with and killed more than just the Tark family. Originally, the arena in Dizia did not belong to the Tark family, but to another great noble, and then Tark exterminated them all. That's what Ono thought. Qin Xia felt the same way, but he knew something else. Tark was able to kill a dozen High Knights wearing only one ring, and those High Knights just splattered Tark's blood. This is an overwhelming power advantage. Logically, the Julius family would be like the other nobles killed by Tark before, but not this time. The reason why I am sure that the Julius family dares to retaliate against Tark, and that they will succeed, and that Tark will not live long. Qin Xia's eyes moved from the window to Ono's face, because Salo is a wizard. The High Knight is a wizard. Ono was horrified. That's impossible. No. Since you said that, you must be sure of it. The Nusrias hate wizards. Because the wizards once enslaved the Nusaria people. The Nusaria nobles hated wizards. Because only the psychic power of the wizard can make up for the huge gap in technological levels, a High Knight who was armed to the teeth with various ancient advanced technological creations died inexplicably. The best example is this noble gladiator team. The golden armor they wear are all ancient relics. Even if their bodies die, they can still use the armor to retain their souls and even revive. But it was useless. Qin Xia stood behind the crowd and with his palms folded, he could kill these golden armored knights suddenly. Chapter 67. The situation suddenly changes. The arena also held a regular fight in the evening. That's how it was. When the time for regular gladiatorial combat had arrived and the arena was filled with spectators, the gladiators had not yet been brought onto the field by the security robots. Qinxia had a bad feeling. Outside the gate of the cave, heavy footsteps were heard by everyone. Then the gate opened, and a man in gorgeous clothes walked into the cave and saluted everyone. "Good evening, everyone. I am the new person in charge." The man saluted and glanced at all the gladiators. "All of you will fight today, except for this wizard and Angron." Hearing this, the gladiators all looked at Qinxia. Qinxia thought for a moment and nodded silently. Out of compliance with the Sword's Edge principle, all the gladiators walked out of the cave, leaving only Angron and Qinxia behind. Didn't the person in charge just get replaced? Qinxia looked up and down at the new person in charge. Could it be that the owner of the arena has been replaced this time? The new person in charge said nothing, turned around politely, walked to the gate and made a gesture of invitation. The security robot entered the cave, stood behind Qinxia and Angron, and raised its electric baton to drive the two away. Qinxia already had a plan when he signaled the gladiators to leave the cave. Now he naturally acted according to the plan and stepped forward and walked out of the cave. When they reached the fork in the road, a team of security robots escorted Angron to another place. Another team of security robots followed the new person in charge to the office of the arena. When passing a fork in the road, someone suddenly appeared and put a collar on Qinxia to suppress his psychic energy at an astonishing speed. When the new person in charge saw the light on the collar light up, he stopped being serious, smiled, breathed a sigh of relief, and continued to lead the way. "Do you think this thing will be useful to me?" Qinxia knocked on the collar around his neck. "Of course it works." The new person in charge nodded. "My master is a wizard, so I know the source of your power very well, and this collar will cut off your connection with the source of your power, so be sensible, don't struggle, and follow me." The new person in charge continued to lead the way. Qinxia put his hand on the collar. He recalled that he had seen the principle of this collar, and it was indeed as the new person in charge said, that it cut off the connection between the psychic and the subspace. This is an ancient technology, probably the product of the human race's greedy and in-depth research into warp technology during its heyday. But the problem is that Qinxia's psychic energy does come from the subspace, but when using it, he does not extract psychic energy from the subspace. Seeing those security intelligent machines and the automatic machine guns above the corridor, Qinxia already had a battle plan. Here he is the only one facing the enemy, and he doesn't need to consider whether others will be accidentally injured in the battle, so it is very simple. When the group reached another fork in the road with a larger space, Qinxia felt that the time had come and gradually tightened his grip on the collar. But at this time, the person in charge opened the office door and saw the person sitting inside, and Qinxia loosened his hand on the collar. "Welcome." Salo put his legs on the desk, the Mad King's lackey. "The office door is closed." The new person in charge and the security robot were waiting outside the door. These servants did not feel threatened by a wizard wearing a collar, even though the wizard was too strong and tall. It didn't matter, Salo's psychic power could solve everything. "As I expected, you attacked that madman." Qinxia looked towards the corner of the office. The body of the previous person in charge was lying there, with only a skin bag left, and ice crystals attached to the body, which was obviously caused by psychic energy. "That lunatic? I thought you would call Tark Master." Salo said lightly, "I broke his neck from a distance of several hundred meters, just like the way you killed the sons of his bastard brothers." As he spoke, Salo stood up and walked to the window of the office. Outside is the fighting area of the Colosseum. Amid the cheers of the audience, the gladiators were blocked by a large number of guards. The two sides have not yet started a war, but it is obvious who will win. Salo turned his back to Qinxia. Qinxia looked at Salo's back with contempt. "We are all wizards, and we are all capable of being hated. We are all connected by the same fate. We should not be hostile to each other, but you sided with that madman. He promised to make weapons for you gladiators, but he can't fulfill this promise. Without weapons and equipment, you can't escape the arena." Facing the scorching evening breeze, Sarao spoke in a leisurely tone. He looked very relaxed. And beneath that relaxed appearance lies extreme excitement and excitement. "I actually don't want to kill him." Salo held out his hand, holding the wine glass that Tark had used. "He was my best friend and soulmate, until he killed my family for a slave. I couldn't accept it, so I decided to stand against Tark. The Mad King's lackeys will be purged. Including you. Solo put down his wine glass and stared into the arena. You will be killed. And the one called Angron, he will be branded with the butcher's nails, all because you helped the Mad King kill the most noble and elegant good people in this world. Hearing this, Qin Xia felt mixed emotions. He didn't expect that his actions would cause Angron to be nailed with the butcher's nail early. I don't know if Turk's murder has any butterfly effect connection with me. Solo didn't know what Qin Xia was thinking. He continued, as if trying to persuade him to stay, of course, if you repent. Boom. Solo's head exploded, and an eyeball shot in front of Qin Xia, but was blocked by the psychic barrier. Watching the entire room turn blood red, Qin Xia raised his hand expressionlessly and placed it on the collar. Ice condensed on the collar, and then Qin Xia tapped it lightly, and the collar shattered. There will always be people better than you, right? Qin Xia looked at Solo's back. The headless body of the wizard noble was leaning against the windowsill. Qin Xia estimated that even after his death, Sorrow would not be able to figure out how he was shot in the head by a wizard wearing a collar using psychic power. It seems that I won't be able to wait for weapons and equipment, so I can only force my way out. Qin Xia murmured to himself, as if he was making up his mind. After taking a deep breath and calming himself down, Qin Xia opened the door of his office. The new person in charge standing outside the door heard the door open. He turned around and prepared to go in to clean up Qin Xia's body, but saw Qin Xia standing in front of him, and his master had turned into a headless corpse. You! Just as the new person in charge was about to open his mouth, Qin Xia punched him in the head and smashed him to the ground. The security robots detected the attack and immediately prepared for battle. But one of the security robots stood at the back of its kind, and the large caliber machine gun integrated in its chest smashed its head and the processor inside into pieces in just a few breaths. This security intelligent machine was the one that Qin Xia implanted with a modified processor. Plans can never keep up with changes, especially now that Xianch is in the subspace. Qin Xia spoke to the security robot as if it were a living person. The intelligent machine didn't react at all. It was only designed to be a producer. It was already a bit difficult to use it for security, not to mention communicating with humans. Qin Xia didn't expect the intelligent machine to respond, so he turned and looked out the window of the office behind him. Outside the arena, further away, is the city of Dazia. There were flames shooting up into the sky, with flashes of fire from explosions appearing from time to time. Apparently Solo did not kill Tark outright. But in any case, it is absolutely wishful thinking to expect Tark to deliver weapons and equipment under such circumstances. This all happened too suddenly. Although Qin Xia had anticipated that something would happen to Tark, he did not expect it to happen so quickly that he would not even have time to deliver weapons and equipment, and that Solo would take control of the arena at an astonishing speed. Every plan is born to be defeated by change and then abandoned. But fortunately, Qin Xia had made preparations in advance. Although they were not sufficient, at least he would not be caught off guard and helpless in such an emergency. In the gladiator's habitat, that cave, there were various weapons that Qin Xia had obtained before. Although the number was small, they were still useful. Chapter 68. The moment of uprising. Angron would rather die than be nailed. Walking on the road, the Primarch glanced at the surrounding omnics, thinking about how to resist. This week he had been listening to Qin Xia talk about the butcher's nails and various hints that he might be nailed with them. It can make people very strong and not feel the pain of the killed person after killing them. This is what Angron wanted. He did not want to show mercy to those damn slave owners and their lackeys. But when I heard Qin Xia say that once a nail is hammered in, he will become a madman who cannot distinguish between friend and foe. Angron, who was taught by Qin Xia how to distinguish between friend and foe, and which emotions were worth feeling and which ones had to be suppressed, felt that if he was hit by a nail, he might as well just die. At least he wouldn't kill the people he cared about as enemies. After finishing his plan, Angron immediately prepared to destroy the security robot beside him. But suddenly a group of guards came over, and all of them were holding rifles that could fire tranquilizer darts. "We take over now." The commander of the guards stepped forward. The security robot's voice print recognition function identified the identity of the person who gave the order and immediately handed over Angron. But at this moment, the commander of the guards suddenly felt heart pain, and then his body straightened and fell vertically. Just as the people around were about to step forward to check, the officer's chest suddenly exploded. Angron was quick-witted and quick-handed, grabbing the security omnic beside him to block the fragments and impact, without being hurt at all. After blocking the explosion, the primitive smashed the security omnic beside him. Plans cannot keep up with changes. We have to act before we can even wait for weapons and equipment. At the corner of the road ahead, Qin Xia's voice and his body came out together. Angron noticed that Qin Xia was carrying the weapons he had taken from the assassination operation at the manor, holding a heart in his hand, and followed by a security robot. This is the officer's heart. I exchanged his heart for a grenade. Qin Xia threw the heart aside. Angron ran to Qin Xia's side, took down the heavy machine gun and held it in his hand. Time for the uprising. It's time to revolt. Qin Xia nodded and helped Angron replace the magazine he had just removed from the automatic machine gun. The battle ahead will be very difficult, but it doesn't matter. I will take you and the others out, even if it costs me something. Together. Angron cocked the bolt. Together, there is nothing we cannot accomplish. Qin Xia did not deny it. He took the beam cannon from behind and held it in one hand, leaving the other hand free to release his psychic energy. Go and rescue those brothers and sisters. In the arena, the gladiators formed a circular shield formation with no blind spots, and the children and older gladiators were surrounded in the middle of the circular shield formation. Among the guards surrounding the gladiators, those holding cold weapons formed a square formation, and those holding long-range weapons formed a volley formation. The two sides confront each other. It seems that our gladiators do not have the courage to take the initiative to fight with the guards. The maggot eye films the scenes on the ground from the air. According to the rules, whether a gladiator who does not initiate a fight is eligible to continue to live will be decided by the audience. Please let those with the highest authority express your attitude. In the audience, a few scattered nobles stood up, stretched out their arms, and pointed their thumbs upside down. Those who did not have high judgment power were not qualified to express their opinions, nor did they dare to raise their thumbs, so no matter what, these gladiators were sentenced to death. Then... Oh, please wait a moment. The maggot eye suddenly flew to the entrance of the arena and controlled the gate that opened to the exit so that all the lights were focused. Even at this time, even after receiving the order to execute all the gladiators, Maggot Eye still maintained the attitude of prioritizing the program effect. Even Qin Xia, who walked out of the gate, had to sigh that the host was really dedicated. Qin Xia and Angron walked out of the dark corridor under the illumination of the beam of light and came to the red sand. Qin Xia raised his left arm with his left thumb pointing upwards. Walking to a place 200 meters away from the gladiators, behind the guards. Qin Xia still had his arms raised high, with his thumbs up. I sentence them to live. He said. Well. It looks like today will be the last fight for these star gladiators. Please enjoy it. The controller of the Maggot Eye pressed the switch, and a large number of fireworks were launched from the entire arena. The passionate drum music echoed in the arena. The guards immediately attacked the gladiators, and at the same time sent some people to deal with Qin Xia and Angron behind them. Facing the various flying ammunition and light beams, Qin Xia held up a one-way psychic barrier with his left hand and controlled the beam cannon with his right hand, firing at the same time as Angron. When the heavy firepower weapons mounted on the quadrupedal combat machines were used by the Primarch, their recoil seemed to be smaller than that of energy weapons. But the Primarch had never used firearms, so his hit rate was 0 at the beginning. But when the Primarch knew the trajectory and killing effect of this weapon, the hit rate gradually increased to 100% in less than 2 seconds. The heavy machine gun would spit out hundreds of bullets every second, and after adapting to this weapon, Angron was able to accurately control each bullet and not let any of it miss. When the magazine was almost empty, Angron could even use this heavy machine gun to shoot through several guards standing in a line, and accurately kill those who tried to fire at the inferior shields used by the gladiators. Weapons like beam cannons are more useful in Qin Xia's hands than in the hands of their original owners. With just this weapon that can penetrate any obstacle, Qin Xia can disintegrate the long-range infantry in the guards and prevent the gladiators from being shot and killed by long-range weapons. As for the gladiators, when the heavy machine gun in Angron's hand fired the first bullet, they had already rushed towards the melee formation of the guards. Qin Xia also created a snowstorm that enveloped everyone. Icy snowflakes were flying all over the sky. Strong winds swept through, blowing up the accumulated snow and blocking the view like thick fog. In the ice and snow, every step of the guards' soldiers would leave a mark and make a noise of stepping on the snow. But not the gladiators. They scattered like ghosts in the supernatural ice and snow created by psychic power. Even if they ran at the fastest speed, they would not make any sound and would not leave any footprints in the snow. From the subjective perspective of the guards, the gladiators would still leave traces, but when the soldiers saw a figure passing in front of them or running past them and immediately released the silver vine, they would either kill their own people or hit nothing. Even though the guards were armed with the most advanced weapons and carried an all-purpose tool called the silver vine, due to their inferior and outrageous tactics and the ice and snow that obscured their vision, they could not even see where the gladiators were, and the gladiators identified their locations by the sounds they made, and beheaded them. Only those who react quickly and are relatively experienced know that they should not look for the enemy at this time, but should turn the silver vine into a shield to protect themselves. Chapter 69. Snow, Blood. People in the audience could see what was happening in the flying snow. Under the deliberate display of the projecting psyker, the audience could see how the guards using silver vines were killed in panic. The nobles and commoners cheered together. Seeing their guards' lackeys being killed, they did not feel angry, but instead thought it was wonderful. What could be more exciting than a gladiator defeating a strong opponent with a weak force, and then slaughtering the powerful guards in turn? The nobles in the audience didn't care what happened in the city of Dizia, nor did they care what would happen in the arena. They just want to have fun. That's it. The battle lasted for half an hour. When the last guard fell to the ground, his blood had dyed the already red sand even more red. Blood flowed in streams in the supernatural ice and snow that would not melt. The heads of the guards were soaked in it and kept rolling out of the ice and snow, pushing the cheers from the audience even louder. The maggot eyes flew around in the sky, constantly adjusting the lights. The beams of light above the arena flickered around the gladiators who were slowly walking out of the ice and snow, and finally focused on Angron and Qinxia. As Qinxia no longer maintained the existence of ice and snow, the ice and snow created by spiritual energy instantly dissipated. The victor of the gladiatorial contest has. Before the maggot eye could transmit the host's words completely, it suddenly flashed from the air into Qinxia's hands. Put your 5 fingers together and crush the maggot's eye. This is not a fight, this is an uprising. Qinxia stepped forward and pointed his finger at the audience. We will no longer provide performances for you. As for the slave owners and oppressors among you, we will find you and tear you into pieces. As soon as he finished speaking, Qinxia was responded with even warmer applause and cheers. The nobles who were just having fun almost jumped up and applauded. A noble lady holding a slave in her hand even stood up excitedly, cheered loudly, took off her underwear and threw it onto the barrier separating the audience seats from the battle area. Qinxia sneered, turned around and led the gladiators back to the cave. But they were not going back to the gladiators' habitat. If they wanted to leave the arena, they had to go through the cave. Enemamus followed at the end of the gladiator group. When he was about to step into the dark corridor and leave the red sand battlefield, he suddenly stopped and shouted something. Those were the words shouted by the rebel soldiers who had been killed by the untouchable Slayer noble gladiators. I'll fuck all the High Knights' families. The arena has been put on high alert. The gladiators walked in corridors filled with all kinds of dangers. When encountering an automatic machine gun, Qinxia would hold up a psychic barrier and use his free hand to use psychic power to remove the machine gun from the top of the corridor. Then the gladiators who could use the heavy machine gun would get this machine gun first. When encountering a laser net, Qinxia would use his psychic power to remotely take out all the components in the device that controlled the laser net, making the laser disappear. When encountering security robots or human security forces, the gladiators armed with machine guns will open fire, and with the help of the psychic power released by Qinxia, the enemies will be eliminated. Every step I took was taken with fear. Qinxia kept one eye open and the other closed, observing everything around him from both a subjective reality perspective and a psychic perspective. If he didn't do this, any hidden mechanism might suddenly appear and kill all the gladiators wearing only a few rags in an instant. He also had to devote some of his attention to fighting. They also have to maintain various ways of using psychic powers. But the gladiators are not babies who will die if they leave their nannies. Whenever a group of enemies rushed out from the fork in the road, ready to catch the rebels off guard, the gladiators would quickly approach while dodging the guns, and then kill all the enemies in no time. No one who can survive in this arena is a coward or a weakling. Those who are tired drink my blood to regain their strength. The Primarch cut his wrists without hesitation and passed through the strict marching formation maintained by the gladiators, from beginning to end. This was considered a temporary rest. Angron felt that Qinxia might feel uncomfortable releasing spiritual energy for a long time, but he did not ask Qinxia if he felt uncomfortable. Instead, he chose to use this method to give Qinxia time to rest. The gladiators were also very tired. They had been fighting in the arena until now. The physical strength of normal humans has its limits, even the Nusryans. Everyone needs a break. Everyone must persevere. Qinxia turned around and said to everyone, "This uprising did come very suddenly, but this suddenness has both advantages and disadvantages for us. There is a war going on in Dizia city, and the nobles are fighting among themselves. So even if we don't get the weapons and equipment support from the Mad King, we at least still have this good opportunity." Listening to what Qinxia said, none of the gladiators spoke. The Janus principle. At this time, discipline has been raised to the extreme, and the gladiators have regarded themselves as part of a rigorously operated war machine. The gladiators, with fierce and determined eyes, half knelt and gasped. As Angron walked past each person with his arm raised, the gladiators would grab the Primarch's arm and hold it to their mouths, quickly replenishing their physical strength with the Primarch's blood. The person who had recovered his strength silently sorted out the things he had hastily picked up from the enemy. Put on any easy-to-remove shoes, helmets, protective clothing, etc. that you pick up. Quickly learn how to use stun batons and ranged energy weapons from Onimamos, then try to adjust the weapons in your hands. Those who were ready to fight again stood up from their half-kneeling position and raised their hands. "We have to go outside first." Qinxia continued to walk in front, collect as much supplies as possible, equipment first, and medicine second. The gladiators were silent and said nothing. The Janus principle. Qinxia didn't need to ask for opinions, but he still had to give the necessary explanations, even if it was a lie. The gladiators needed explanations to understand what they were going to do and whether they would have honor at the moment of sacrifice. Then run towards the desert, and Angron will show you the way. As for me, I will fight back and try to find the mother of the Aquila brothers, as well as other slaves who are valuable to us and willing to follow us. When Qinxia said these two sentences, most of the gladiators were stunned. Just as Aquila was about to say that he wanted to leave the team to find his mother, Qinxia told him about the relevant plan. "You." Qinxia stared at the gladiators. "If you and anyone related to you are imprisoned, I will do everything I can to rescue you." After saying that, frost spread in the corridor, and Qinxia's eyes were once again filled with white psychic light. Keep going. Chapter 70. The Synthetic Man's Mission. After everyone has gone out, Qinxia will turn back by himself. He thought so in his heart, but just like this uprising, plans always cannot keep up with changes. When the gladiators fought their way out of the corridor, what caught their eyes was not only the entrance and exit of the arena, but also a large number of enemies. Security intelligent machines, which were originally designed for labor production, are not qualified to appear here at all. The elite guards, four-legged combat machines, and intelligent machines specially used for combat are the biggest obstacles standing between the gladiators and their goal of escaping. The elite guards were also arranged in a square formation of the cold weapon era, but they were obviously experienced in battle. They showed no fear in the face of the gladiators and the wizards among the gladiators. The silver vines formed a cover in front of them, and their guns were mounted on the gun bodies formed by the silver vines. As for those combat intelligent machines, they were covered in large areas of heavy armor, were nearly 4 meters tall, had claws and swords integrated into their arms, and carried 2 large-caliber long-range weapons on their shoulders. There were 5 of these terrifying-looking black iron men, standing in front of the guards. On the chest of each combat robot are characters in an ancient non-Nukrian language. The travel security service of Nukria Company is really bad, but it's worth a visit. A noble earthling left this post while traveling in 211.M19. The combat machines issued deep and cold warnings at the same time. Employees of the Colosseum project and contract workers of the company must abide by the company's guidelines and are prohibited from leaving their workstations without permission. First warning. Return to work immediately or you will be shot. The gladiators could not understand the ancient warning sounds that the intelligent machines issued according to the program. Qinxia could understand, but he had no other choice at this moment. He raised his hand to hold up a circular psychic barrier that covered everyone. The gladiators were also prepared to approach the enemy under the protection of psychic barriers and then fight to the death. Crest was floating half a meter above the ground because of the anti-gravity spear, his eyes fixed on the enemies in front of him. Aquila protected his brother and Theseus behind him. But just as the war was about to begin, a large anti-gravity aircraft slowly descending from the sky attracted everyone's attention. The aircraft is printed with the crown emblem of the Turk family. The guards on the ground wanted to open fire, but when they saw who was in the aircraft, they all put down their weapons and allowed the aircraft to land. The person who got off the aircraft was not a member of the Tark family, but Salo, whose head had been blown off by Qin Xia. Go back to the arena. Salo ordered all the gladiators coldly, these 5 combat robots are enough to kill you all. The gladiators remained unmoved. Qin Xia looked at Salo and found that something was wrong with him. And Salo also glanced at Qin Xia, and slowly walked to the front, ignoring the dissuasion of the guards' officers. Standing in front of the guards and the Omnics, Salo faced the gladiators, smiled and closed his eyes. When the eyes opened again, there were a large number of dense symbols flowing in them, like the running stage of some program displayed on the screen. All combat Omnics turned around at the same time, and the heavy weapons on their shoulders released 2 spheres, which shattered silently the moment they left the muzzles. A large number of tiny small intelligent ammunition killed the guards present in an instant. Detection. Detected. Forced intrusion. Anti-data intrusion program, start, start. Start, start, start. You have been granted the authorization. Have a nice day at work, Mr. Security Officer. Facing the stunned gladiators, the surface of Salo's body rippled and he returned to his original appearance. Hi. Brown raised his hand as usual and greeted Qin Xia with a smile. Brown. Qin Xia was surprised. I thought you died with Tark. Brown felt a little guilty when talking about this, his spine was suddenly broken by someone, and I didn't even notice any movement, but he didn't die. Not dead. Qin Xia was even more surprised. Yet. Brown nodded, looking very sad. He wore armor that could bind his soul to activate the bomb hidden under the city of Dazia. Then he asked me to leave and find a safe place to spend 10,000 years one after another. Qin Xia nodded first, then raised his eyebrows, then, you came to find us. Brown also nodded. Looking at the bewildered gladiators, the stone man thought for a moment and spoke slowly. We are a species of stone people, or rather, a species of synthetic people. We were designed to serve the human race in its pursuit of civilization and advancement. I'm not the high-level stone man with magical powers that you say is either an inventor or a manager. I'm just a role-playing NPC created by an entertainment industry company, a lowly stone man. But I am indeed a synthetic, a stone man. Brown's eyes fell on Qin Xia's face again. When my fellow humans have been wiped out and the human species has fallen into barbarism and ignorance, I have to stand up and do something. You said my dream, the dream of turning Nukria back into a playground, is impossible. Maybe you'll even think I'm crazy. Brown's chatterbox habit struck again. But Qin Xia listened very carefully and enjoyed every word Brown said. But I thought about it and decided that what I was after wasn't just that amusement park. Brown shrugged, forcing a wry smile on his face. That's the era I'm after. In that era, terrible weapons worked on the enemies they were designed to fight against. Artists, managers, scientists, businessmen among humans, they vent the dark side that is inherent in the human species and cannot be eliminated in this place. When they leave here, they are still noble and rational. Unlike the humans now, every human living on Nusaria is a barbaric and dark slave owner or slave from birth to death, forever playing a role-playing game that they are unwilling to play. That's it. This is what I'm after. After thinking this through, I decided to take responsibility for my fellow high-level stonemen who have become extinct. Perhaps as a low-functioning stoneman, my abilities are not enough, but I have to do something. Serving humanity, this is my origin and mission. The people who designed and made me and my compatriots are no longer here, but the things they made are still here and can protect their descendants. I hope that in the history written by future human historians, after mankind has fallen into darkness and ignorance, a low-functioning stone man born in an era of light will do what only the extinct powerful stone men would do: defend and serve the interests of the entire human race, rather than an amusement park. Until the eternal and infinite life of this stone man ends at a certain stage of this mission. Qin Xia stepped forward and stretched out his hand. We can start from Nukria. Brown held Qin Xia's hand and said, by the way, I just went to the slaves' residence and let many of them go. Some of them plan to join you after hearing about your story. Brown raised his hand towards the aircraft and the hatch at the rear of the aircraft opened, revealing a large amount of weapons and equipment, several slaves, and some supplies inside. Yikula. Yikyuka. The two brothers standing among the gladiators heard the call they most desired, which made them immediately run towards the source of the sound. The brother's mother was so excited that she burst into tears and hugged her sons who came running towards her. Brown looked at Qinxia and made a gesture of invitation to the aircraft. Please get on the plane of Ace Pilot Brown. You are undoubtedly an ace pilot. Qinxia smiled, turned around and waved to the gladiators, get on the helicopter. A large anti-gravity aircraft rose into the sky, carrying the people, supplies, weapons, and equipment that brought liberation to themselves. There are also combat machines. When Brown's hand touched the hull of the aircraft, which was originally not invisible, became invisible, although only on a visual level. Brown glanced at Qinxia who was sitting in the passenger seat, reached out and turned on the player, and the playlist of ancient music collected by the stone man began to loop. What's the target? Brown asked. In the desert, it's our shelter from sandstorms. Qinxia replied. Brown nodded, the target has been set at 500 kilometers. The music player changed the music it played according to Brown's thoughts. If you miss the train I took, it means I've left alone. Listen to the whistle that stretches for 100 miles after 100 miles carrying me far away. Listening to the music, Qinxia asked in surprise, 500 miles? Where did you get this song? Brown puts his hands on the rudder, and his flexible body sways slowly with the fluctuations of the music. 17,000 years ago, a tourist collected ancient music players, and then he dropped one of them. Ancient relics. Qinxia looked out of the aircraft window. Using his shinix made him tired, though only slightly tired. The large aircraft flew smoothly in the air, passing over the chaotic areas on the ground. Outside the city of Dizia, the guards and Omnics are attacking the city. The High Knights flew in the air using various relics of ancient technology. Among them, the High Knights who used weapons of mass destruction released light beams, which made a big hole in the huge metal wall. But all this has nothing to do with the invisible aircraft flying by at this moment and all the people inside it. The gladiators, who had just experienced a bloody battle, listened to the melodious music and thought about the future with anticipation or fear in the cargo hold. 100 miles, take me far away. Listen to the whistle that stretches for hundreds of miles. Outside the city of Dizia, an officer who was forced to use ancient tactics and could only pay with his life in the siege battle looked up at the sky, watching the tall knights floating in the air, with no tears in his eyes. The army composed of slaves and civilians who had been brutally selected by Tark were fighting a desperate battle with the invaders in the streets. Carrying everything leaving home. Theseus and Yakuka in the cargo hold of the aircraft were lying by the window, looking outside. In the direction of Dizia city, a ball of light slowly rose, covering half of the city. The whole area was as bright as day. Brown turned around and looked out the window sadly, an engineering bomb. I found it for Tark, and he detonated it. Now I am in rags. At the border of the scorching red sand desert and the artificial oasis, a lizard lying on a stone felt an abnormal gravity coming from the air and immediately crawled under the stone. 100 miles, another 100 miles. The aircraft penetrated deep into the desert in the air. On the wall of the fortress territory of the Murray family above the endless red sand, the officer looked at the ball of light rising in the direction of Dizia city and clinked glasses with his subordinates. They talked and laughed about who would win this aristocratic infighting. People have various opinions, but there is also a consensus. No matter how far the infighting among the nobles goes, the people who will truly remain unharmed and can even reap huge benefits will only appear in one place. That was the Murray family. At least in the fortress territory of the Murray family. Chapter 71. Fighter. A week has passed since the fight to escape from the arena. A sandstorm swept across the desert. The cave's open entrance keeps the storm of nanobots out in a way that is visually incomprehensible. Sweet springs flow from what appear to be naturally formed holes in the cave. Water is not hard to find in this place, but food is hard to find. Last time I came here, I was wondering why the cave in this damn place could stop the nanorobots, and there is also an endless source of water here. Qinxia and Stoneman Brown sat face to face, talking about the past, the present, and the future. Brown glanced at the gladiators who were drinking the water and said with a complicated expression, when Nukria was still an amusement park, this was actually a toilet. As soon as he finished speaking, the gladiators who were drinking water looked up suddenly. They didn't understand or care about Nukria's past. But they understand the word toilet. Don't worry, the water here is filtered from any water source that can be collected from the surrounding area. Brown retracted his gaze, but the water here is still 10,000 times cleaner than 99% of the water you have drunk in your life. If it's clean, then there's nothing to worry about. The gladiators continued to drink. Brown also continued the previous topic, reviewing the escape from the arena a week ago. To be honest, I was nervous when I drove the aircraft here, because I thought the probability of your success was very low. You know, it happened so suddenly. Tark's spine was broken, and then the siege began. The High Knights flew in the sky, and the guards suddenly appeared and began to attack the city. Brown looked incredulous and worried. I don't know what your plans are exactly, but they certainly haven't kept up with the changes. Sorrow suddenly went to the arena. I was about to assassinate him, but I found him dead in the arena. Did you never think that Solo would go to the arena, or that he would be killed by you? Qin Xia clicked his ears and nodded without objection. Yes, it was too sudden. Brown continued to sigh. Qin Xia pretended to listen carefully, but in fact his attention was not on what happened a week ago, but on Angron. Two children, Yakyuka and Theseus. Yakyuka tapped Theseus' shoulder gently, motioning her to look at Angron and Crest. But Theseus ignored Yakyuka and focused on learning broadsword skills from the gladiator named Kramaka, who used a brass broadsword. Crest sat down before Angron. After the sandstorm passed, Crest prepared to get up and go outside for patrol. After all, she was the only one who could fly in the sky and fly faster than a fighter jet. But when he stood up, Crest's anti-gravity spear pulled Angron up half a meter from the ground. Because Yakyuka had tied the chains to Crest and the Primarch's legs at some point. Looking at the pranked Crest and Angron, the gladiators laughed out loud. Even the two who were pranked laughed out loud. Perhaps Crest and Angron had intended to cooperate with Yakyuka, otherwise they would have surely noticed that the chain connected the two of them. Haha. Qin Xia chuckled twice and turned to look at the chatterbox stoneman, who was still talking non-stop. This kid. Although everything happened very suddenly, we still managed to get out. Brown said, luckily you knew the way and were somewhat prepared, otherwise I would have arrived too late and I'm afraid you would have been killed by the traps in the corridor. Qin Xia was just about to say or ah in response when he saw the mother of the two brothers, Yakyuka and Yakula, walking towards her youngest son aggressively. Yakyuka turned and ran, but was caught by a laughing gladiator and given to the brother's mother. Then Yakyuka was pressed on his mother's knees and beaten. At this time, Theseus turned his head to pay attention to Yakyuka, and a smile flashed across his face. Are we really going to try to take over the Murray family's territory? Brown mentioned his future plans. Of course. Qin Xia turned around quickly and said seriously that it was true. This cave has no defenses and is very conspicuous in the desert. It is not a place to stay for long. We have to find a way to take over the territory of the Murray family. Qin Xia lowered his voice again. I know that most of the gladiators think this idea is not realistic, but they have not raised any opinions due to the principle of the sword edge. What do you think? Brown did not answer immediately. The chatterbox suddenly shut up, observed the faces of each gladiator, and then said a very brief sentence, if you ask me, they don't have any ideas. These people never thought about living. Qin Xia stared at the stone man. Brown shrugged. Qin Xia lowered his head and thought carefully. This problem may not be changed until there is a major breakthrough in the situation. Qin Xia changed the subject. 3 days ago, I asked the gladiators if they wanted to change their titles, such as from gladiators to fighters. Brown nodded, and then. And they didn't want to. Qin Xia said helplessly, they felt that the arena did enslave them, but part of the reason they were able to successfully fight their way out of the arena was because they had strong physiques and absolute discipline. They believed that these all came from the life of a gladiator. To be honest, I think their strong physique and discipline come from genetic modification, but they are not wrong. After all, genetic modification is only the lower limit, and the upper limit still requires their own training and exploration. Brown said. Qin Xia agreed. Brown went on to analyze, in fact, it is good to continue to maintain the name of gladiator. They hate the slave owners, but they are also proud of the glory they have achieved in the arena, because these people have nothing since they were born, and the only thing they have is their record. On the other hand, as the stars of Nuceria, the gladiators had a reputation effect. When the people of Nuceria saw the gladiators' performances in the arena, they would think of what kind of people the gladiators were. In short, they would label these gladiators themselves. If the gladiators are seen as rebels and good guys, then future propaganda attacks by the High Knights will be less effective. Even if the gladiators were not considered good people, but villains, this identity still has appeal, because people are naturally diverse, and some people like villains. Qin Xia listened to these words and felt that what Brown said was right. Gladiators are newsreus after all, and most of them grew up in the arena. Identity recognition is also one of the important reasons for their unity and cooperation. So when Brown was still talking, Qin Xia ended the topic with one sentence. Now I am going to conduct an exploration of the subspace, looking for a way to quickly cross the subspace and return to reality. Chapter 72, Dive Again. Pass through the curtain and go deep into the treacherous spiritual space. Qin Xia conducted a second deep dive exploration into the subspace. Just like last time, he was in a submarine. The submarine quickly dissipated, but just like last time, when the spiritual energy absorbed by Qin Xia was used up and replenished, the submarine appeared again and continued to carry Qin Xia deep into the subspace. Compared with the last time, Qin Xia made a careful observation of the subspace this time. Strange little creatures that look like cubes with a tentacle on each face are circling and wriggling around the submarine. They do nothing but wriggle, which makes people wonder if they were created just to cause visual nausea. And in those indescribable geological structures that were sometimes very far away and sometimes very close, there were even more subspace creatures. There are no good things among the creatures in the warp. Don't come into contact with them, let alone bring them into reality. One of my apprentices signed a contract with the so-called elves. As a result, before he died, he dragged dozens of souls into the warp with him and became a slave to the creatures of the warp. The think tank's teachings rang in Qin Xia's ears as usual. But Qin Xia has a different opinion on this matter. His experience in the use of psychic energy is not as good as that of the White Scar's think tanks, but as a time traveler, he knows more about the warp than the psychers in this universe who are timidly exploring the power of the warp. The dark gods, namely Kern, Xianch, Nurgle, and Slaanesh, are part of the warp but not all of it. In addition to the dark gods and their servants, there are also chaos demons among the creatures of the warp, and there are various other creatures beyond that. In this spiritual alien space composed of extreme emotions and mental forces, nothing is impossible and nothing is certain. There is no good or bad in the subspace creatures. They are just subspace entities composed of extreme emotions and abstract concepts. They are influenced and controlled by the emotions or concepts involved. Their behavior, thoughts, and instincts will all follow the influence of the many emotions and concepts that constitute their entities. They have no self, no good or evil. All entities here are essentially slaves to the warp. The principle of subspace teleportation technology is to allow a person to temporarily travel through the subspace where there are no space and distance restrictions, and then return to the real universe and appear where they want to be. This is not difficult, but I have to find something that can anchor the coordinates of the real universe in the subspace. Qin Xia looked around and spoke to the submarine cabin where no one else was except him, as if making a wish. If you want to accomplish something in the real universe, it is not enough to just have ideas, you also need practice and action. But in the subspace, a spiritual alien space, the waves and changes that ideas can cause far exceed practice. This is especially true for a soul that is powerful and close to psychic energy. The submarine continued to sail in the subspace, and Qin Xia quietly waited for his ideas to cause waves in the subspace. After sailing for a while, Qin Xia realized that the submarine was not moving at all, but the strange environment around it that was incomprehensible and indescribable was moving. Eventually what looks like a road with eyes approaches the submarine. There is a creature that looks like a road sign stuck in the road. Hello, traveler. The road sign creature has no mouth. When Qin Xia wanted to understand what the other party was saying, the moment this thought came to his mind, a dialogue box appeared in his sight. When there were soul creatures in the real universe who had the idea of drawing paths and anchoring coordinates, I was born. To be more specific, I am the projection of the idea of drawing paths and anchoring coordinates in the subspace, and I am the spiritual entity created by this projection. 2 sentences appeared on the dialogue box. Can you help me find the way and coordinates to a certain place in the real universe? Qin Xia asked, just like the subspace engine can find a stable route in the subspace. Cannot. The words of the sign creature appeared on the dialogue box. I can only help you mark the road, but I can't help you open up and find the road. I am a marker. You need to find a spiritual entity that can help you identify the direction. You can find it in a place where spiritual entities gather in the subspace. Then you can help him collect various items in exchange for his agreement to help you identify the path. Can it be simpler and more direct? Qin Xia frowned. When his brain was thinking according to what the road sign creature said and had the idea of searching, another subspace creature appeared. It was a huge fleshy compass, covered in eyes. No one knew where the compass came from, nor where it came from, but it appeared anyway. Hello, Lost One. I am the product of the strong desire of intelligent life in the real universe to identify the direction. Their thoughts shaped me in the subspace. I can help you find the path you want to find. 3 lines of words appeared in the dialogue box in Qin Xia's eyes. Qin Xia didn't know what to think for a moment. The subspace is so weird, even weirder than dreams. Qin Xia wasn't even sure whether the road sign creature in front of him was a real subspace spiritual entity, or whether he was trying to find the way in a non-intuitive and roundabout way and thus created this road sign creature. Can you help me find the way to the territory of the Nucria Mori family? Qin Xia asked. After saying this, Qin Xia wanted to explain further, such as telling the subspace creature in front of him what Nucria is, what the Mori family is, and their approximate direction. But the Nucria are also a human species, and their souls and thoughts will also cause waves in the warp. There is no information transmission process in the subspace like there is in the real universe. A temporary channel has been marked for you. Please note that this is a temporary channel. If you want a longer distance and more stable channel, please look for a more powerful subspace creature. You're welcome. I am the spiritual entity projected into the subspace by the desire of the trekkers. I am going to help other trekkers now. Compass turned around and suddenly disappeared. Qin Xia looked at the road sign. The signpost creature moved and then remained anchored there forever, marking the temporary passage that the compass had just pointed out. How long can this passage last? I know there is no time in the subspace, but there is time in the real universe. How much time in the real universe can it last? Qin Xia asked the road sign. It is temporary because the spiritual power thinks it is temporary, but this temporary may be eternal or just a moment to you. It can't be temporary, or it can be temporary. It is temporary, and it is not temporary. 2 lines of text appeared in the dialogue box. These 2 lines of riddle-like text made Qin Xia give up looking for the answer on the road sign. It's possible that roads are temporary, but it's unlikely that roads are temporary. Self-contradictory words and phrases like these can be applied to anything in this alien space constructed by the spirit. In any case, Qin Xia achieved the purpose of this journey into the subspace, and he did not stay any longer. He returned to the real universe after absorbing the subspace psychic energy again. Chapter 73. Lost Soul. It's done. Qin Xia opened his eyes and was about to talk to the gladiators about the subspace teleportation, but found that all the gladiators gathered around him. What's wrong? Qin Xia asked. The gladiators' reactions reminded Qin Xia of the last time he dived deep into the subspace, when these people looked at him with the same eyes. There was confusion and concern in his eyes. You just suddenly scolded whoever you caught. Ono had a complicated expression, you scolded every one of us. Hearing this, Qin Xia looked at Angron. I know you don't mean to scold us. Angron's face was filled with concern. But, what's wrong with you? Qin Xia looked at Brown again. The stone man frowned helplessly and said hesitantly, you said my flying skills are not good, man, that really hurts me. I am most proud of my flying skills. Others had similar reactions. Qin Xia was confused. I was sitting cross-legged with my eyes closed just now, traveling in a spiritual space. How could I possibly scold you? When you first came to the arena, you sat cross-legged on the ground for a while and then suddenly started laughing. Ono said, I thought you knew what would happen to you last time. If you didn't take the initiative to confess to us, you must have something to hide, so I didn't mention it. Qin Xia recalled Ono's reaction after his first deep dive into the subspace, and what Ono had concealed at that time. You just said that you traveled to a spiritual dimension. Brown suddenly realized something and suddenly became very serious. I have read some research materials on mental illness. If a person's soul and body are cut off from each other for a long time, your situation will occur. For example, a good person suddenly becomes evil for no reason, or a bad person suddenly becomes unconditionally nice to others. In short, a certain aspect of the mind becomes extreme and out of control. Doctors have a jargon for this disease of the soul, lost soul. During the most prosperous era of the human race that Brown experienced, many terminal diseases that were absolutely untreatable in ancient times were treated or had a deeper understanding of them. For example, in ancient times, there were terminal mental illnesses such as hysteria or insanity. Through human exploration of things related to the subspace, the cause of these mental illnesses has also been discovered, which is what Brown said, the so-called lost soul. First of all, I can be sure that I will not lose my soul. Qin Xia said, thinking. He was certain that what he had felt while deep in the warp was real, and not some dream that concretized irrational abstractions into understandable sensations. When diving deep into the subspace, Qin Xia will have a feeling of being separated from his body. It can be concluded that after the soul enters the subspace, a certain aspect of one's psychology will become extreme and out of control, but fortunately this only makes people feel confused. After the soul enters the subspace, it also takes away the psychic power, so it will not be out of control to the point of releasing psychic energy indiscriminately. When the soul returns, everything returns to normal. As to whether this problem can be anticipated and prevented, Qin Xia knew clearly that he was walking on a spiritual power path that had never been taken before and would never be taken again. For a normal psychic, no matter if he has the courage or not, it is extremely difficult to penetrate the veil of the real universe, so there is no precedent for Qin Xia to refer to. Regarding this kind of situation similar to losing the soul, the only solution Qin Xia could think of was to find a closed place in the future to conduct a deep dive into the subspace. You all heard what Brown said. Qin Xia glanced at everyone helplessly, lost soul. How can you take what he said in this situation seriously? The gladiators were not hurt by the extreme emotions Qin Xia displayed when he dived deep into the subspace. They saw what Qin Xia did. For these people who had known each other for a short time but had been through life and death together many times, no words or actions could alienate each other. They were just concerned about Qin Xia's condition. Now seeing that Qin Xia was not in a hurry, they were all relieved. Let's go scout the territory of the Murray family tonight. We'll take that tonight if we can. Qin Xia stood up and announced to everyone. Inamamos raised his hand. Qin Xia nodded and signaled Aonyo to speak. I know some more detailed things about the Murray family. Ono said, because I was a slave of their family when I was a child. Late at night. The temperature in the Red Sand Desert is extremely low. 1,000 meters away from the Murray family fortress territory, gladiators wearing armor and holding weapons were lying on the desert. The Omni tool called Silvervine is wrapped around their arms. These armors and weapons were brought by Brown and were originally placed in the cargo hold of a large anti-gravity aircraft. It can be seen that these things were made in a hurry and have no advanced functions, but the materials used are very powerful. The material used to make the armor is a material called bronze. It is not real bronze, but a material that is extremely tough yet surprisingly light. The material used to make the sword is called brass, which is a slightly heavy but extremely sharp material. Tark created these weapons based on the information he collected about each gladiator, ensuring that each gladiator had the weapons they liked and were good at using. My anti-gravity spear is ineffective. Kleist crawled on the red sand to Qin Xia's side and whispered. Qin Xia looked back and found that the anti-gravity spear on Crest's leg was no longer releasing energy. There is a control core of the close defense fire array of an orbital defense platform in this damn place. Qin Xia recalled what the stone man said, so your anti-gravity spear should be locked by it. And the locking range is only 1,000 meters. Kleist said, an ancient creation. I heard that Chatterbox praised this thing to the sky, but it turns out that the effective range is only 1,000 meters. I thought the control core was so powerful. The nearby gladiators also agreed with Kleist. They kept approaching the fortress territory in order to test the range of the control core that Brown mentioned. It was not until they were within 1,000 meters that Crest's anti-gravity spear became ineffective. This situation was better than anyone expected. How could these barbarians know how to adjust the performance parameters of the control core? When they got it, it was in the extremely close-range emergency mode, and these people don't know how to adjust it, so they can only use the mode they got when they got it, so the range is only 1,000 meters. The chatterbox in Crest's mouth walked towards the gladiators and responded to Crest's words. Qin Xia turned around and looked in the direction where the sound came from, only to see Brown walking towards the crowd in stealth mode. Didn't I ask you to watch over the cave and protect those who can't fight? Qin Xia quickly stretched out his hand to signal Brown not to move forward. You are also a technological creation. What if the core of the defense platform invades you and locks you up? You're right, but I'm a stone man. The computing power in my brain plus the additional computing capacity provided by the butcher's nail is greater than the computing power of all the functional cores of its entire orbital defense platform. Brown continued to move forward, approaching the edge of the control core's range. Don't forget that I am a stone man. Even if I am a low-functioning stone man, I am still a stone man. I will protect the glory of the entire stone man race, and by the way, let you see what ancient times are. Halfway through his words, Brown fell down in the red sand. Under attack. All computing power has been transferred to the firewall center. Resisting the invasion. Restarting. Brown's body was convulsing violently, and a cold warning sound came out of his mouth. When the control core was invaded, Brown didn't even have a bit of extra computing power to maintain the operation of the emotion simulation function. I have seen the power of the ancient relics. Qin Xia looked at Crest helplessly. Take him back. Yet. With the anti-gravity spear locked and even his movements affected, Crest had no choice but to take on this task and drag Brown back to the cave shelter. Chapter 74. Fortress Territory. The towering walls were dotted with huge spires, and wherever the naked eye could see on the walls, there was dense and heavy firepower. In addition, from the huge shooting holes on the city wall, giant artillery barrels with imaginable power extend out. The fortress looked formidable, and anyone who saw it would have no idea that there existed an army in Nuceria capable of taking it in a siege. As a well-informed person, Qin Xia has a way to take this place in a frontal siege. The solution is general cannon, orbital bombardment, Titan. Any of the three options can take this place, but now there is neither a huge siege artillery called general cannon, nor a battleship capable of orbital bombardment. But if a psyker who had just figured out how to warp teleport still had to engage in siege warfare, then psykers wouldn't be a force that was so heavily guarded and hated. When Qin Xia wanted to find out more information, his uncontrollable but never failing predictive ability suddenly took effect. The perspective keeps zooming in and out. But never confusing, very clear. Under the fortress territory, the huge control core was sending out a shrill alarm, but the guards officer in charge there could not understand what the alarm meant. The control core detects and invades a stone man, sounding an alarm to warn others that an invasion may be imminent. The guards were annoyed by the alarm and kept hitting the control core. The control core still faithfully performs its duties, using louder alarms to alert those present. It is the controller of the part of the AI control cores in the 20K orbital defense platform that is responsible for intercepting enemy firepower. Because it detected and invaded a stone man, its database, which had not been updated since the Iron Man rebellion, made it think that a stone man stood on the side of the Iron Man and wanted to attack Nuceria's low Earth orbit. In the ruins of the huge defense platform still in orbit around Nucria, there is a control core that can be used to autonomously collect and analyze information. The AI that has been separated out has no way to observe the outside world. As for what the AI core said, the enemy's Stone Man anti-information intrusion system has been cracked. It is speculated that the enemy has landed on the orbital defense platform. The defense mode has been adjusted from extremely close-range efficient interception to anti-landing invasion. The control core's range was then reduced to within the fortress territory. In a high tower in the fortress territory, the personal servant of the patriarch of the Murray family was discussing matters with the officers of the guards. The officers said that after the Mad King's death, the Tark family had restored the tradition that was banned by the Mad King. The Tark family guards must fight according to what was written in the ancient tactical books. The personal servant said that was the Turk family's business. The Murray family had the guards use advanced tactics not because of the Mad King Turk. Now that the Mad King is dead, there is no need to return to the traditional tactics in those tactical books. The personal servant also said that the master of the Murray family was a kind person. Traditional tactics were just the High Knight's control and manipulation of the guards. They just wanted to see the guards go to their deaths, so they made the guards follow tradition. The master of the Murray family was not cruel, so there was no need to restore traditional tactics. These things have nothing to do with your guards, that's all. Only a High Knight can defeat a High Knight. If they encounter a High Knight from another family, do you expect a bunch of you crawling guards to deal with the High Knight? Regardless of whether the advanced tactics used by the Murray family guards should be abolished along with the Talco family, what does it have to do with you, a bunch of high-level slaves? After being scolded by the patriarch's personal servant, those guards officers who wanted to restore traditional tactics went back to rest. A large number of security robots are scattered on the streets and city walls. Countless monitoring devices were watching every move inside and outside the city. The guards who had been standing on the city walls for generations to observe the outside world used thermal imaging to patrol back and forth, but no heat source could be seen in the desert except for some poisonous insects. In the largest tower in the fortress territory, the immediate family members of the patriarch of the Murray family lived there. They were either enjoying themselves or resting from the exhaustion after the enjoyment. The shorter towers around the tall tower are inhabited by members of the side branches of the family. Qin Xia opened his eyes, and the spiritual energy light dissipated. He had learned so much information, but in the eyes of others he just closed his eyes and opened them again. Qin Xia, who felt that he was ready, asked Ono, who among those people from the Morui family should I control first? Control the children of the current clan leader. Ono said, this family is characterized by loving couples and excellent parent-child relationships. They also have an incurable genetic disease, so those children who survive to grow up are regarded as precious heirs of the family. Controlling them first is even more useful than directly controlling the clan leader. Okay. Qin Xia sat cross-legged on the spot, closed his eyes and concentrated on calling upon his spiritual energy. When he opened his eyes again, bright white spiritual energy was gushing out of his eye sockets. Leave the chieftain to me to kill, okay? Ono said suddenly. Qin Xia nodded and released his spiritual energy. Including the Primarch, the souls and bodies of all people traveled through the warp in a very short time. Qin Xia's psychic power protected their souls and isolated them from the horrific environment in the subspace. And Ono's soul projection approached the crowd at some point, and his soul, which emitted white light, dispelled some malicious creatures that were isolated by Qin Xia's spiritual power. The people participating in this teleportation only had the feeling of being torn from something and put back into something for a moment. The only thing they saw was a living signpost with eyes and a hand pointing the direction. When everyone reacted, they found themselves in a huge tower. Everywhere they looked, they saw guards sleeping on bunk beds. It was snowing inside the entire tower, the ground was covered with ice, and the cold wind was howling. Kill! Someone shouted, and the gladiators immediately stepped forward with weapons to kill the guards who were still sleeping. The Primarch ran wildly on every level of the tower, chopping every person he passed in two with his axe, and he showed no mercy to slavers and lackeys. The silver vine that Talk made for the gladiators was also a technological creation and could not be used here, but the gladiators were able to kill most of the soldiers in the tower on their beds with their agility and decisiveness, not to mention that there was a Primarch to help. Soon, the guards on the lower floors of the tower heard the noise on the upper floors. They woke up and ran to the armory at the bottom of the tower. Angron realized through the emotions he sensed what these enemies believed could turn the tide, weapons, so he rushed into the armory before all the gladiators, leaving the fastest of the guards only able to touch the outer shell of the weapon. During the battle, some gladiators discovered that Qin Xia was missing, but they could only resolve the battle in front of them before looking for Qin Xia. Chapter 75 Nightmare. The top floor of the most magnificent and towering spire in the fortress territory. In the luxurious bedroom, on a bed with a side length of 10 meters lay the matriarch of the Murray family and several strong slaves. In the middle of the night, the patriarch suddenly felt thirsty in his sleep, got up from the bed, and drowsily went to get the wine on the bedside table. After taking a big gulp, the cold and sweet wine made the patriarch sober up a lot. When the patriarch was about to go back to bed to continue sleeping, he suddenly found a tall man sitting at the desk. Sitting at the desk is Qin Xia. He was nearly 3 meters tall and sat on a wide chair with his legs crossed and a book on his lap. Research notes on ancient ruins defense devices. Qin Xia looked at every word on the page very carefully, and kept in mind the research that many generations of the Murray family had done on the control core that their ancestors had obtained from the orbital defense platform. The matriarch lost all desire to sleep as she watched this scene. When she was hesitating whether to scold or ask, Qin Xia spoke first. "What's your name, ma'am?" Suya. The patriarch replied. "Suya Murray. I understand." Qin Xia smiled and lowered his head to continue reading. Suya was trembling all over, but she was still able to move to the side, and got closer to the wardrobe where her weapons were kept. The ice that appeared on the ground made Suya, who was barefoot, feel freezing cold, but she still endured it and slowly approached the closet. Like all Nusaria slavers, Suya was a high knight. She has angel armor with huge wings, and no attack can penetrate the shell. With a gravity control stick, he can crush a group of people in an instant. Have gloves that can break down the human body into molecules. Possessed. She possessed a lot, just like the other high knights. But at least while approaching the closet containing those weapons, Suya was just a weak ordinary person. Your family has been researching the control core for a long time, but unfortunately, there is nothing useful to be gained. Although you Muis are stupid, your ability to lock things is amazing. You should thank your ancestors for setting up locks in many places in the fortress that only Muis can unlock. Otherwise, you would be a corpse now. Qin Xia smiled, without any threat or intimidation on his face, only gentleness. Qin Xia threw the book aside and looked at Suye. Get away from that cabinet, or I'll crush your head. Suye shivered and stopped. But she had one more thing she could use in this situation. When this thought came to mind, something implanted in Suye's body began to work. But after Qin Xia raised his hand and turned over his palm, the thing that was working suddenly moved from Suye's body to Qin Xia's hand. An implant. Qin Xia looked away from Suye, who had fallen to the ground screaming, and looked at the implant in his hand, watching it under the psychic vision, syringe. The medicine in it can give you amazing recovery power. Nuclear biotechnology is really worthy of its reputation. The frost quickly adheres to the implant. As Qin Xia clenched his fist, the entire hard implant instantly shattered into pieces. Suye, who was lying on the ground, watched the implant being crushed and suddenly fell into endless despair, because she had nothing left to use, let alone change the situation. Follow me. Qin Xia walked towards Suye, reached out and grabbed her hair, dragged her out of the room and into the elevator. The elevator reached the bottom of the tower, and when the door opened, what appeared were not the guards that Suye longed to see, but gladiators. Angron ignored Suye, who was being dragged by Qin Xia's hair, and stepped forward and said, "Someone has sounded the alarm. The people on the city wall have begun to move towards the inner city. They have blocked all our entrances and exits." Of course. Qin Xia knew this was inevitable. He continued to drag Suye to the square outside the tower. The guards on duty on the other side of the city wall have completely surrounded this place. A large number of security and combat intelligent machines were also standing in front of the guards' soldiers, staring eagerly. They clearly had a huge advantage and could kill all the gladiators who came in from nowhere with just one shot, but the moment they saw Suye, all the guards subconsciously lowered their guns. Ono had already brought a team of people to clear out the nobles from several nearby towers, while Suye's dozen sons and daughters were held hostage by the gladiators and forced to kneel in the square. The large number of slaves who had run out and gathered together because of the chaos just now were shivering in groups of 3 or 5 in the corner of the square. "Anonymous!" Suye exclaimed when she saw the old bear. The expression on her face was first surprise, then astonishment, and finally anger. "How dare you organize an uprising? I order you to let your soldiers let me go." After shouting this command, Suye herself was stunned for a moment. She soon realized that the situation was different and she shouldn't be so tough. But for an aristocrat among aristocrats who had been accustomed to giving orders to others since childhood, changing his attitude was not an easy thing. "I am not your slave." Ono leaned on his sword and looked down at Suye with contempt. "Even before I fought my way out of the arena with my brothers and sisters, I was not your slave. You have no right to order me around, let alone now." Suye tried hard to beg, "I have given you many things. You have been living a life of luxury since childhood. You are a high-level slave and my personal servant. You should at least consider those things. You have given me a lot, but you have also taken a lot from me." Ono still held his sword and looked down on the slave owner, his voice unusually cold. "When I was a child, I refused to be your personal servant, so you had the guards beat my parents and sisters into a pulp with sticks, and then said it was all because of me. It was my fault. When I finally mustered up the courage to escape and rebel, you suppressed the rebellion and killed all my brothers and sisters who had fought alongside me through thick and thin. Then you said it was still my fault because I rebelled and disobeyed you, so I lost them. Now I'm going to make you lose something too." At this point, Ono suddenly turned around and beheaded the Suye descendant closest to him. Ono was not wrong. The slave owners of the Murray family did have very good parent-child relationships. When Suye saw her son dying in front of her, she was in so much pain that she couldn't breathe. The guards surrounding the inner city also had no reaction. They were at a loss and equally confused. What is happening now is like a dream. A group of gladiators rushed into the fortress territory of the Murray family, which was impossible to be captured in a siege, and then captured the nobles like pigs and dogs. Only the most insane people would have such a nightmare. Wallace Murray. Qin Xia walked up to another of Suye's descendants and looked him up and down with a smile. The shirtless tall knight in front of him was the one who had thrown Qin Xia and Angron into the worm's belly. Wallace no longer had his previous arrogance and stood there in panic. If it weren't for the gladiator next to him grabbing his neck, he wouldn't even be able to stay standing.